The wedding day has finally arrived. The big bells are ringing, announcing the beginning of the joyful event that everyone has been waiting for. It was hard to believe that my lord had decided to get married. He had chosen a woman of extraordinary beauty as his wife. The time had come, the door opened, and the beauty walked inside. Everything was about to begin, but the groom was still not there. People in the hall began to whisper. They felt sorry for the bride who was abandoned. The man was absent from the very beginning of the ceremony. The main character tried to cope with the stress, but it was extremely difficult for her. All eyes, unfortunately, were directed straight at her. She wanted to hide from them. Once upon a time, there lived a marquis, and he had a daughter. He and his wife had long wanted a child, and now a miracle has come true. The baby looked like pink cotton candy, growing up surrounded by parental love, which she received without fail. The child's character was overcome by embarrassment and compassion, perhaps because she was so sweet. The girl was not like everyone else in high society, experiencing difficulties, even in ordinary conversations with people she preferred to read in the company of ladies or attend tea parties. The family loved and cared deeply for their daughter. Despite what she was like, sometimes her parents would affectionately ridicule her weaknesses crossing the line. The day came, which was very important. The day of the dance ball. It also meant that it was time for the girl's debut. The heroine tried to avoid attending the celebrations, but this time she couldn't not show up. She was left with no choice. It was difficult to get ready, but the situation worsened. When the lady arrived the moment the door opened, the lady was barely holding back her tears. Avelina was in the hall, and this was what was so confusing. The woman was the heroine of the novella, The Betrayal of the Black Rose. She was the one who shone brighter than anyone else at the ball, eclipsing everyone else and leaving them no chance. At that moment, everything became clear. The woman did not believe that she had been reborn in the world of the novel. She hoped that it was some kind of illusion. In her past life, the heroine was shy and weak-willed, just like in her new body. She was afraid of people, and all interactions left her exhausted. The woman found an outlet and immersed herself in reading stories. Now she could not believe that she had become Nadia Wayne, a minor character in the novel. The girl constantly began to ask herself why this happened. It all came down to the fact that she had read exactly that book last. The novel was full of difficult scenes, but she managed to read it only 50 times. Considering it not a lot, after getting into the book, something happened to the lady. The problem arose with the realization that according to the plot, Nadia was to be beheaded while she was in the hall at her wedding. The girl returned from her thoughts to reality. The blonde man standing next to her apologized for the my lord's lateness. The hero realized that he must try not to interrupt the ceremony and thought that he could replace his master. The determined girl agreed. The wedding had to be a success, no matter what anyone said. In her past life, Nadia would have run away long ago because of such an embarrassment, but everything was different. Her life was not a bed of roses. First, her parents died in an accident, then her uncle inherited the title, and the girl was left penniless. The capital was left behind, and she had to get married. The girl hoped that everything would be fine. The priest began to read the vows that the bride and groom would take. Both said the cherished yes. The servant brought a pen. All that remained was to sign the document, and then the ceremony would be complete. The blue-eyed girl asked herself not to worry. There was just a little bit left, but she didn't know if she would be able to survive the numerous glances. Unfortunately, in any case, Vine would be laughed at. She understood this, the reason being that the groom was being replaced by his assistant. The girl looked at the door again. No one had appeared there yet, so she continued writing, her hand shaking. The last signature with the last name Vane appeared on the paper, and it was the groom's replacement's turn. A man approached him. The heroine sighed sadly. What was happening once again confirmed that the bride was abandoned by her partner on her most important day. The door swung open sharply. The beauty turned around, not understanding what had happened. Just recently there had been deathly silence in the hall. The man who entered noticed that he seemed to be late. The people in the seats backed away. Vine covered her nose with her hand. There was a metallic smell everywhere. A drop of blood fell on the floor. The novel, The Betrayal of the Black Rose, is a permissive work in which new victims appear on every page. Nadia was one of them. She was a minor character. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance, except for her pink hair. Even the extra was beheaded. Sensing the approach of death, the beauty made a decision. Once a person finds himself in a book, he will try to change his destiny. The lady understood that in literature, everything is possible. There was only one thing Nadia didn't understand. The girl was shaking even while reading the novel. and didn't know how she could avoid the tragedy in real life. Luckily for Vine, the plot was just beginning, and in order to save herself, she had to leave the capital before the main events unfolded. The woman was thinking about this while on the balcony and was distracted from her thoughts by a calm female voice. It turned out to be Melissa. The blonde immediately asked why the debutante was alone today, was her special day, which she couldn't miss. Nadia said that she was a little scared. Melissa sighed with displeasure. The strange sensations should have ended long ago, and it wasn't worth getting upset about. The woman said that her uncle was already waiting for Vine, but the beauty asked for a few more minutes, which caused even more indignation. Walking away from the balcony, the blonde clenched her teeth. She was incredibly irritated by everything that was happening, in her opinion. It was already too absurd. About 3 years passed since that day. Melissa came to her friend to find out if she really decided to get married. The girl pretended to be sad. After the death of her parents and her father receiving the title of Marquise, it seemed that it was better for them to live together. Vane wasn't considered rich and didn't know how to communicate with people, so in that case, it really was worth getting married while her husband had something to look at. If only the parents had survived, there would have been plenty of options to escape the capital, but it was not so. Marriage remained the best solution. Blue Eyes was of course scared, but she understood that it was better than beheading. In circumstances where his niece was getting married and leaving her father's house, there was only pure benefit for the Marquise. The groom owned the barony of Alsford. Vine learned that the baron was about her age and lived in the east of the empire. Her uncle said that the girl would be accepted only with a small dowry, and she should be grateful. Melissa said that the man looked like a dog, and in her opinion, no one would want to marry such a poor man of their own free will. People from the eastern border did not have a good reputation, and the woman thought he was probably a boring person. The pink-haired girl simply agreed she wasn't sure about anything. Her friend continued to press, saying that she was just worried. Everyone knew that the man was ugly. When Nadia clarified, Melissa smiled discreetly. She continued to play her role. A woman should not imagine anything for herself, and under no circumstances should she spend her wedding night together. The young man is not in good health and will soon die, but if the girl enjoys her life, everyone will think that she is petty. Nadia began to doubt that the wedding her uncle would conduct would not go as well as the lady had expected. Survival has always been a priority for the heroine, which is why she got married, but now standing in the hall, she gets scared when she sees blood. Blue Eyes tries not to panic, but she gets progressively worse. There is too much blood, and she faints when she sees it. As soon as a lady looks at the color red, she wants to forget it all because of the incident with her parents. The heroine tries to control herself. Her life depends on the wedding. Nadia proudly raises her head up. She convinces herself that it is worth waking up and not fainting at the most unpleasant moment. The woman did not understand who was in front of her. The blonde man standing next to her said something about him being his master, that man being the lord and future husband of Vine. There was fear in his eyes. He should be barely able to walk according to rumors. Everything should have been different, but somehow everything is fine. The young man slowly approached and raised his hand. The lady cringed, expecting that she might be hit. In a minute, a lot of thoughts flashed through my head, but nothing happened. The wait seemed to drag on for a moment. Everything merged into one. The young man wiped the blood from his face and turned to the altar. The blue-eyed girl felt strange because they were meeting for the first time, but it seemed that this was not their first meeting. The assistant says that it's not too late to sign. Even though the guy was late, Nadia is glad that he came at all. Melissa was wrong about everything. The young man was beautiful. There wasn't even a hint of a disability in him. The beauty again fell for her friend's empty words. The woman noticed the man's signature, and it turned out his name was Altier Alsford. Now she understood where the déjà vu came from. With black hair like coal eyes, a fiery scarlet color, and a mole under his left eye, he has a cold, hard appearance. The name, just like the eyes, is captivating. Altier is the most terrifying character in the novel. It was he who cut off Nadia's head. The woman remembers reading that after some time, the guy distinguished himself on the battlefield, received land, and became a duke. The girl was so busy thinking about the capital that she forgot who her fiancé was. Now the blue-eyed girl understands that she has problems. The first life ended in a car accident, and the second, it seems, will end in execution at the hands of a villain. The little girl understands that what is happening is unfair. She just wants to die normally and live to old age. The beauty tries to calm herself down again. It's worth remembering that everything will be fine because no one is born a villain. The girl noticed that the main events had not yet begun, which meant that it was worth preventing the transformation. Opening her eyes, the blue-eyed girl looks at the young man. For some reason, it's hard for her to imagine him as kind, especially without a face. The man cast a suspicious glance, but it terrified the heroine so much that she froze, realizing that she had stopped thinking. The woman turned towards the hall. She didn't notice the reaction. If you think about it, despite the fact that the young man showed up covered in blood, no one cared. The blonde asks if the gentleman managed to do everything. He nodded, saying that he had already killed everyone. The girl froze. The hero decided to leave a few, alive to chat with them. The heroine feels as if she can't move from the spot. The cold pincers of fear have taken hold of her. The brunette ordered Nadia to come to her senses. Her head could fall at any moment. It was worth making sure that he didn't kill his own wife. The lady fainted and was carried to Alsford Castle. The doctor explained that the girl must have been tired from the journey, but there was nothing serious. The man raised an eyebrow. He had never heard of people falling from exhaustion. This was too much, even for such a fragile girl. Not taking into account the gentleman, this can happen to anyone. The doctor said that since the woman is at risk, she should be monitored. The young man is angry with the girl. The brunette immediately begins to get ready, promising that he will prescribe treatment. He was frightened by the atmosphere. The knight who came closer asked to change his facial expression and tone. It was scary to imagine how other people would react to this. Alsford tuts at his wife so much that even the doctor gets scared. The hero doesn't understand again. His opinion differs from Blank's. The young man has problems because he thinks he was polite. He said he didn't even swear, so he thinks everything is quite tolerable. A lordly tone is needed to put a man in his place, but it's too much for a lady. Perhaps he just doesn't like bending over to interact with Nadia. The brunette snorted. He caught the one who was hunting his wife. This is already a sign of kindness. Blank reminds that the hunt was also on Alsford, and since he has no heir, they tried to harm the woman at the same time. The blonde reminds him why the young man got married. Altair needs an heir as soon as possible. Blank suggested having dinner with the woman tomorrow. He would arrange everything, or the gentleman would cook something himself, something that would lift Nadia's spirits. The reasoning is calm and sound. Before becoming a good husband, you need to become that kind of person. The blonde promises to help. It's time to leave, but the knight reminds them that their wedding night is coming soon. The brunette becomes aggressive, but they ask him to remain silent so as not to wake the lady. The young man looked at his wife with a hint of a smile. Blank immediately noticed that this was the first time something like this had happened. He regretted it because he had almost been killed. A clear morning arrived. The beauty got out of bed and went to the mirror. She needed to tidy herself up. Looking at herself in the reflection, Nadia understood perfectly well that a good future did not await her. The girl decided to look around. The room was incredibly clean, and it looked like the girl had become the first occupant. It is unclear whether it can be so good from the first day no one touched her. Of course this is great, but the lady begins to understand that she is really hungry. The lady lets out a calm breath, the irony being that hunger makes itself known, even in such an ambiguous situation as this. Blue Eyes shouldn't have been afraid since she was hungry. It meant she was still alive. She should take care of a snack she needed to come to her senses and try to get everything right. The woman remembered that no one forced her to leave the capital. She herself had made a plan to escape and wanted to get married. Consent was given. Nadia repeated the words like a mantra. It was not time for her to be afraid because everything was chosen independently. The girl lightly patted herself on the cheeks. First, she decided to eat, and then the energy to get things done would appear. The blue-eyed girl waited for someone to come for her, but no one was there. This was strange because even if not for breakfast, then the maids were supposed to come to her for makeup. The thought crept into my head that the estate workers had learned about what had happened at the wedding. They could ignore it since even their master didn't like Nadia, and no one needed her in her new place either. Memories come to mind of how, after the accident, the girl woke up and her uncle came to see her and found out about everything. It turned out that the baby's parents had died. She didn't believe it and started crying because it was difficult to cope with the pain. Without trying to calm him down, the blonde decided to share some news. That day, he was supposed to become a marquis. Such were the laws of the empire. The uncle could have sent his niece away that very day, but he decided to say that they were blood relatives and the treatment should not be cruel. Smiling, the man asked, not to blame him, but in an instant, the woman turned from a beloved and only daughter into a rejected relative. It all started when the servants ignored Nadia, and her uncle did not give her the required share of the inheritance. Several years have passed since the accident, but everything remains the same. Now the girl is an unloved wife. On their wedding night, the groom did not want to come to her. The beauty was sad that she was not even fed when she was about to cry. Someone knocked on the door. She immediately jumped up. The door opened, and a dark-haired young man entered the room. The woman wanted to scream because she was afraid of her husband. The girl didn't understand what was happening. She had no choice but to assume that the young man had come to kick her out. Instead of screaming, the hero calmly placed a tray with some food on the table and turned away. The beauty looked at the dishes in surprise. She didn't want to grab the food without asking, but she did it anyway. The brunette was silent for a while, until he asked if the lady would continue eating, standing up. Alsford seemed to be pressing, asking her to finish eating before everything got cold. Nadia could have been indignant, but the hunger was so strong that she simply nodded. After the bun, the lady started on the soup. The taste was excellent. With each spoonful, the flavor became more and more intense. Almost finished with her meal, the beauty raised her head only to meet Altair's angry gaze. The girl realized that she shouldn't have eaten while the owner of the estate was standing aside and stuttering. She thanked him for the delicacies. Everything was wonderful, but the beauty swallowed it all too quickly and began to feel sick. The plates were empty, but her husband was still standing nearby. Nadia quietly asked if he wanted to say something. His gaze made it seem like she needed to ask. There was no answer. The woman immediately fell to her knees, asking for forgiveness. It is not clear what happened, but Altair is definitely furious. The voice finally came, but it was absolutely calm. The husband asked to get ready for dinner and not to be late. The dinner will be a welcoming one, so it would actually be better if the lady made an effort to look good. A minute later, the young man left. He behaves with apologizing people the same way as in the novel, so she decided it was better not to apologize anymore. Life is more precious. While the lady was thinking, she did not notice how someone entered the door again. The green-eyed maid looked at the woman lying down and quietly asked why she was sitting on the floor. Nadia didn't want to lose face. She said that she checked the quality of the carpet. It would be better to exchange it for a more refined, softer option. The brunette was overjoyed that the lady had the same opinion as her. The woman began talking about the interior. It would be nice to change the furniture, the bed, and the curtains, as well as half the castle in general, but so far, no one is doing this. The maid decided to introduce herself. Her name is Anna, smiling. The woman asks to take care of her. The heroine began to complain, mentioning that Pavel, the butler, asked her to come help, but he himself refused to go. About 30 minutes had passed since the beginning of the conversation. The blue-eyed girl was tired. She had never had to talk and listen so much. During the conversation, the lady realized that the baron was poor, his wife's bedroom looked sparse, and the entire estate was about the same. Melissa's words came to mind. The main character had heard a lot of things from her, but only this turned out to be true. The maid is happy that Nadia has arrived. Because she must have a concept of beauty, the woman never thought about actually being a baroness. She just wanted to escape. Surely Altair didn't marry out of boredom. Perhaps he needs a housewife and the girl can handle that. The Wayne family taught the lady a lot, and she even retained experience from her past life, which will help her become even smarter. In the novel, Alsford was a bachelor, and it is clear that the lands were in poor condition because any aristocrat would refuse to live in lands on the outskirts. The Duke devoted himself entirely to his work after receiving the title and did not want anyone to come near him. The guy's wife is a very mysterious character in the book, and Nadia realized that a lot now depended on her. The beauty talked with the maid and decided to go on reconnaissance. Opening the door, she realized that the corridor was empty. Anna said that she needed to relax, but as soon as the lady lay down, she was overcome with anxiety, which prompted her to make a sortie. It was so dark around that the lady was afraid of getting lost. The woman walked at random until she touched something warm. At first, it seemed that there was a door ahead, but then a cough was heard, which was not a good sign. A rough voice asked what the girl was doing. Her eyes immediately opened in horror. She realized who was in front of her. All this time, the lady stood with her palms pressed to Altair's chest, his terrifying gaze piercing with cold. The woman jumped back, but miscalculated. Because she tripped over her own shoe, she realized that she was about to collide with the floor. Nadia closed her eyes, but nothing happened. Looking around, it became clear that her husband had caught Wayne in time. The man grabbed her wrist tightly and asked menacingly why the lady had gone out alone, assuming that she had decided to run away before it was too late. The girl screamed she made her own choice and would never run away, She understood that responsibility could not be thrown off. Blue-eyed sadly noted that she still did not understand what the Lord wanted from his wife. In any case, she would try not to disappoint. The lady knows more than Altair seems to think. She begs him to tell her what is required to make it easier to complete. The young man quietly asked if the lady would really work on what he wanted, as if he couldn't believe it. The brunette asked not to address him as Lord, but to call him by his name. The blue-eyed girl thought it was better to be respectful, but was ready to change everything. The lady said she knew more than she thought, so it was her turn to try to guess. It would be quite simple. Blue-eyed quickly realized that she was being tested in her heart. She hoped that after she said everything would be right, she would try. The girl promises that she will try her best. The woman knew that she had to cope, and she was setting herself up for exactly this. Guessing is not that easy, but it is not difficult either. If a person does not know something, one can always learn. The answer can be found in books. At night, the lady will not find anything. Altair asks to inform the butler, so that he can take the lady out in the morning. The conversation seemed to have come to an end. The young man did not expect more. He easily grabbed his wife under his arm and walked forward. The girl asked to let her go, but nothing worked. It was dark in the corridor. She herself would not return to the room. The blue-eyed woman couldn't calm down. She understood that she could have gone at random. Altair chuckled. At this rate, his wife would have broken something. The lady is tired. This is also noticeable. The young man thinks that he does not need any incidents in the castle. It is easier to keep quiet. The beauty still believed that she would be fine, but it was obvious that common sense was not the Duke's thing. The hero left the woman in the room. He didn't want her to get hurt, and this doesn't seem like a villain's principle. The door swung open. Anna showed up. The blue-eyed girl asked her to knock next time. She nodded, remembering that it was time for them to go. Dinner had begun, and everyone was doing nothing but waiting for the mistress of the estate. The woman jumped up, remembering the master's words that she must not be late. The girl didn't want Altair to stare at her the entire meal, so she asked him to help her get ready. The maid ran from side to side to find everything she needed. The heroine suggested going, as she was the main thing for her, was not to disgrace herself in the process. Laughter could be heard in the knight's room. They had already started eating, and someone suggested that something was wrong with the new mistress. The boys whispered, before answering Cain, who asked why anyone would doubt the lady. The knight was asked to listen. The brunette began to explain, reminding where exactly the Aylesford estate was located. The entire area around the castle is purely rural. A capital city, Beauty has moved to the seedy east. She must have gone crazy to agree. Lord Altair is also a problem. His facial expression never changes with any emotion. The guys were expecting someone who would be like their lord, a taciturn person. But at the wedding, Nadia was beautiful, completely different. The strange thing is that even after her husband showed up covered in blood, the lady still decided to sign the documents. Cain thought that the heroine had been sent by Altair, although even considering his many connections, he would not have gotten involved with the Marquis's niece. The guys decided not to be too harsh with suspicions. The girl is considered so beautiful that they can turn a blind eye to everything else. Cain stood up to sing to welcome Nadia, and someone started shouting at him to shut up and not ruin everything. The lady stood behind the door. She felt like a general going to war. The worried Anna offered to open the door for the lady. Nadia promised herself to be decisive. She tries to calm herself down by telling herself that she will not worry anymore. The woman is shaking. Persuasion does not work. She will appear in the same clothes as in the morning and does not even know what to say. Bits of a song can be heard from the room. It seems that Altair can't sing, and the lady was finally able to relax. Finally, the woman entered, and her husband's angry gaze immediately fell on her. All desire to stay vanished, but there was no turning back. The looks of those gathered are just as terrifying as the leaders. They are not much different from him, but Aylesford is still the most frightening of all. While the blue-eyed girl was deep in thought, Anna came out and offered to sit down next to the others. The girl was sure that she would be reprimanded for being late, but later her place, of course, was next to the gentleman, and there was a dish on the table. For the new mistress of the estate, they prepared a traditional Oriental meal. The maid explained that the plate contained chicken in tomato sauce with spices. Since the brunette didn't say anything, the little girl decided to start eating. The beauty didn't know how she could eat a whole chicken, but she was ready for it. The woman noticed that everyone around her was eating with their hands. It was probably tastier that way. She would have liked to do the same, but etiquette did not allow it. Aylesford extended his hand towards the dish, and the lady instantly became frightened because she thought that, for simply being late, everything would be taken away from her. Instead of doing what the heroine feared, the man placed vegetables in front of her, asking if she would eat them. The young man suddenly behaved completely differently. He helped because he realized that the beauty was unable to cut the chicken herself. The taste turned out to be wonderful, as if the food was prepared by a chef from a five-star hotel. The woman understands that everything is even more wonderful when there is something delicious nearby. Altair didn't stop staring straight ahead, and the heroine assumed that this meant she would have to eat everything just like in the morning. The blue-eyed girl promised that she wouldn't leave a single piece. Nodding, the brunette asked to ask the maid if she needed more. Nadia was also offered some stew. She feels like she wants to cry, because the level of food in her stomach is already almost 100. The lady thought she had no chance left, but a man approached her and smiled welcomingly. Cain was the one who sang it could be heard even behind the door. The young man was laughing. He wouldn't have allowed himself to do that next to a lady, but still. The hero noticed that he was much better at creating a good atmosphere in a company than at singing. He was an interesting gentleman. At the end of the conversation, the man offered her a drink, and of course, Wayne couldn't refuse. Cain grabbed more in advance so that everyone would have enough. He had to go through a lot to be first in line. The young man says that he is usually the first one to want to do something. At first he seemed confident, but the picture disappeared. He began to stutter and looked scared. The beauty raised an eyebrow. She didn't immediately understand what was wrong, so she quietly asked what had happened to Cain. He remained silent, but then decided to tell her anyway. The man began to shout that my lord seemed too cruel. The lady turned back. She and Alsford met eyes. The hero continued to speak. Cain believed that it wasn't his fault that the young man didn't come first. The brunette had thrown something at his subordinate's forehead, and the latter hadn't understood whether it was okay to use an aura for such purposes. The gentleman was happy that he was doing well, but the statements made him angry again, and he wanted to throw out another stream of energy. The girl noticed a ball in her hands that she had never seen before. It turned out to be an auror materialized energy that is used as a projectile. Auror could only be used by people who had reached the level of a swordmaster. She had heard that there were few of them, but such power was to be expected from a villain. The man would be better off channeling his energy in the right direction. Looking angrily at Cain, he ordered him to get out, so as not to receive special training as punishment. The hero jumped up and declared that he would leave right now before disappearing. He looked back one last time. The owner loves his wife much more than he thinks. Initially, the young man simply tried his best to be confident and kind, but it seems that everything went wrong when he crossed some invisible line. The brunette made it clear what would happen if he suddenly got into trouble. Cain remembered what special training meant. They would take out their anger on him, not allowing him to fight back. It was shameful for the knight to be scolded right in front of the lady, even though he had simply taken a glass of beer. Nothing criminal. She probably wasn't very thirsty, but she didn't say anything. After Cain left, the couple was left alone in deathly silence. The girl began to drink her drink, thinking that the young man probably hated her company. The beauty would have liked them to have a proper conversation, but Altair did nothing but talk and order food. With the lady's small dowry, he had no need of her. After the second cup, the woman turned bright red. She didn't know what to do, but she really wanted to sleep. Her eyelids were getting heavier and heavier. The woman quickly became drunk only because she was silent, drinking in large gulps. She decided that it would be better to go and get some fresh air, but because of her husband, no one would keep her company. Thanks to Cain, the main character felt better for just a moment, for which she was grateful. But it all ended quickly. It was disgusting to be in a place where no one was happy to see her. Laughter was heard all around. The beauty suddenly began to get angry. She did not understand why she suddenly had to accept the situation, when in fact, she was also a valuable person. The blue-eyed girl was overcome by the desire to clarify everything. As it was, once and for all, she jumped up now in a state of intoxication. There was absolutely nothing to be afraid of. Everything should be fine. Her hand was about to swing, but then the girl realized that her body for some reason was not moving. Altair deftly grabbed the lady by the wrist. He had long since realized that she seemed unable to do so. The woman looked silently, her head completely clouded, so it took her a while to formulate her thoughts. The scream rang out. It was even louder than before. The little girl thought that it was her husband who was wrong, but she herself did not see the problem in herself. The beauty was asked if she was sure, and in response she had to fight back. In the process, the heroine accidentally touched the young man's body, for which she began to apologize. The hero didn't understand what was going on. Leaning a little closer, he calmly asked, wanting to know why the lady constantly apologized whenever she met him. The woman is so agitated that this immediately makes the situation worse. She apologizes for this too, realizing that in general, not everything is so simple. She needs to expand her vocabulary. Altair exhaled. He was fed up with what was happening, because it was only getting progressively worse. The heroine continued to mumble something about efforts. The hero picked up his wife in his arms. She started screaming, and the sudden change in the situation made things worse. He had to clarify what was going on to avoid further embarrassment. In the young man's opinion, it would be better for everything to be exactly like this than for Milady to walk and stumble at every step. The blue-eyed girl drew attention to the guy's face. It became noticeable that his cheeks and ears had turned noticeably red. In fact, the beauty found it hard to believe this. The girl began to convince herself that villains never get embarrassed when holding a lady in their arms. A conviction arose in her head that the whole problem was in the drink she had drunk. Looking at the overturned mug, the woman promised that she would never take even a drop in her mouth again. The brunette carried his wife into the room and laid her down on the bed. She fell asleep almost immediately. Every time she looked into Altair's eyes, she trembled, but the alcohol made her bolder. The couple are the same age, but one cannot help but notice that they are completely different. The beauty's body looks fragile, as if it were made of crystal. She is the daughter of a respectable man who once held a high position. Altair will forever remain a mercenary who is not destined to look like an aristocrat. It is logical that a weak capital girl is afraid that something can be done to her. The assistant arrived in the room to report that Anna was also unable to do so the gentleman would have to take care of his wife's clothes. The brunette asked, blushing slightly. The blonde asked to change Nadia's clothes. The hero did not understand the owner's indignation, so he assumed that he would have to do it. Hearing this, Alsford became even more angry. The young man knew why he had asked for such a thing. The couple's wedding night had been postponed because the bride had fainted, but the hero should have been with her long ago, not just walking around, just looking at her. The brunette screams he would like to have heirs, but the blue-eyed girl is frightened as soon as she sees him. Unfortunately, the young man did not understand that he should go to meet her and make an effort to free the girl from fear. Everyone remembers how the hero showed up at the wedding covered in blood, the lady, a beautiful girl who grew up in the capital. No wonder she was very struck by such an appearance. Blank said roughly the same thing, seeing that the boys looked alike brothers after all, and adjusting his glasses, the man nodded. Still, Alsford understood that he would inevitably show up at the wedding in the form he was in. Everyone knows that enemies were in first place that day. The host decided to ask about the man they left alive in order to find out information. Blank has already talked to him and says that the man is responsible for everything that happened. The main character is sure that his target was a woman. Nadia, he thinks so. It has long been known to everyone that Balhal is a rather nasty person who is not uncommon, and he will continue to pursue the opponent's wife as the easiest target in this race. His gaze fell on the peacefully sleeping beauty. If she found out about everything, everything would be bad. She would tremble with fear again. The master had to figure out what to do. The assistant distracted him from his thoughts. He was tired of standing with a man on his back. Perhaps he should carry Anna somewhere so she could rest a little. Finally, he asked her to take care of Nadia. As soon as the door closed, the man exhaled with joy. Finally, the annoying one had gone away, and they could be in silence. The woman hugged the young man by the hand. He blushed, not knowing if it was really worth changing her clothes. They were in a strange situation. When morning came, the girl sat up in bed. The sun forced her eyes to open, but her eyelids were heavy, and the little girl could not remember what had happened the day before. In her past life, her ladylike instincts had never let her down, and she had always left a little earlier than expected. But this time, everything was different. Her untied dress caught her attention. The heroine assumed that she was trying to untie a tight shoelace, but failed because she was very tired. She suddenly felt nauseous. Her hand was groping around the table in search of a glass of water. Someone came into the room. Anna barely opened the door. She looked very bad, but tried to say her line she brought water because she thought that the lady would really need it in the mornings. The blue-eyed woman raised an eyebrow. She didn't quite understand why the beauty had come to work at the first rays of the sun instead of asking someone to replace her. Perhaps it was about Pavel, but the heroine thought it would be strange if the responsibility fell on his shoulders. The woman meant that she could ask another maid. The brunette blinked her eyes in surprise, asking how it happened that now, besides her, someone else was working there. There were only 3 workers in the castle. the heroine did not believe what was said. The estate is huge, but it definitely doesn't have enough people. The blue-eyed woman asked if anyone ever helped Anna, and the brunette said it wasn't hard for her to manage on her own. Sometimes you have to ask Pavel for help, but it's not that bad. If guests arrive, which almost never happens, the butler takes responsibility. Nadia thought that such people usually handled the finances at home, but it turned out that the blonde man did that too, and the lady sadly realized that all the responsibilities still fell on Anna. The woman realized what was really going on in the castle. The lord was acting in an unthinkable way when he didn't care about his subordinates, of whom he had almost none anyway. Alsford is much poorer than Wayne expected. Things are bad. The green-eyed girl said that Pavel knows all the details if necessary. She can even call him. There will be no problems. The only butler servant and accountant must be very busy to run around on unnecessary errands for the lady. The woman thought for a moment, her mind recalling some happy memories. Her mother had told her daughter since childhood that in order to quickly get used to a new place, it was better to get close to the servants from the very beginning. Mother was right from the start, and this became clear. In adulthood, Nadia became the mistress of the estate, and she intends to do everything as best as possible. First, she will have to get to know the mercenaries better, because only then will the work become more enjoyable. The woman said that she wanted to meet Pavel as soon as possible, but before leaving, the heroine wanted to take a bath. Having immersed herself in warm water, she relaxed, and the fatigue gradually left her body. The blue-eyed lady could not imagine that Anna would try so hard everything was fine, but it was time to go out looking around. The lady realized that the maid had forgotten to put a towel. The woman had no idea what to do. She didn't want to go out naked, but the water was starting to cool. Someone opened the door. Apparently Anna had returned, jumping up. The lady came out shouting her name. It turned out that Altair was in the room. His eyes widened in surprise. A voice behind the door asked why the gentleman had closed it abruptly, but there was no answer. The beauty did not understand what to do. Shame filled her entire consciousness. It became much worse since she could not dry herself off. The maiden decided to at least change her clothes. Blank looked inside. He misheard, or the lady really screamed. He noticed that the young man's face turned scarlet. There had to be a reason for this. The brunette said that nothing had happened, that nothing could have gotten worse, because the assistant had banged on the door, and Alsford yelled that he would deal with his wife himself and that there was no point in touching him. Left completely alone, the hero blushed again. He wondered why, when he entered, he did not even turn away, but simply stood there like a statue, unable to look away. A few minutes later, the woman appeared again. Nadia explained that this was her room, and that was why she didn't expect to see him. If her husband warned her about his visits in the future, such an incident would never happen again. The young man chuckled. He didn't think it was worth bothering with nonsense if he just wanted to see Wayne. The blue-eyed girl asked again why everything was like this, reminding him that the room belonged to her. The brunette continued more calmly. They were in the shared bedroom. It belonged to him just as much as it did to his wife. The beauty looked scared. It seemed she had made a mistake. The situation had worsened. The man looked at her with disdain. It was normal for a married couple to share quarters, and there was no problem with that. Nadia's eyes widened even more. She hadn't even thought about that. The woman, of course, had never heard of such a thing. She came from the capital, where aristocrats slept with each other only in cases of extreme necessity. High society was poisoned, and in order not to be rejected, everyone there had to behave like everyone else. Even if spouses slept together every day, they would certainly be reproached for indecent behavior. The girl said out loud that since her parents were of noble blood, they were always separated. The young man did not understand whether he should follow such rules. The beauty began to shake. She tried to say something, but she was stopped by throwing a jacket over her head. She wanted to know why the gentleman was angry. When the conversation ended, the hero walked out with his head bowed. What was happening resembled madness. The girl looked so innocent and bright that he could hardly resist the smell. In the hallway, the man met Pavel. The blonde watched the young man's reaction. Noticing that many strange things had happened, he asked if everything was okay. Perhaps the gentleman had hit his head, since he was standing there, as if he was not himself. The brunette thought it was no problem to change the subject. The guy asked why the butler had brought so many papers. They contained bills for 3 years that needed to be delivered to the lady. The gentleman nodded. If the girl doesn't know how to work with this, nothing bad will happen. If she needs help, the man will figure it out. Pavel waved his hand. The lady is from a prestigious place. She probably has experience. The young man was about to leave. It was time to meet Nadia. What he heard opened the hero's eyes. He was in shock. No one dared to see the blue-eyed girl in the form in which she appeared before the man. The assistant was about to leave, but he was abruptly stopped. The villain ordered him not to make any sudden movements, and to come only in an hour, maybe better in 2. The brunette explained the situation by saying that it was much better to leave him alone so he could sleep peacefully. The hero was tired, the room needed to be cleaned, and he needed to leave in 3 hours. Each time the gentleman increased the time. It all reached 5 o'clock. Anna came into the room. She noticed that the lady was wearing a cape. It was hot outside, so she found it strange. The woman calmly explained that the maid had forgotten to prepare a towel, and sincere apologies were immediately heard. She had been in such a hurry that she had completely forgotten about it. The blue-eyed woman needed help. She asked if it was okay to share a bedroom with her husband. The brunette nodded. The couple has the right to do this. On the contrary, it is considered normal. The girl nodded. She thought that the room belonged to her, because her husband had not shown up for several days. The young man wanted the beauty to rest because she had been feeling unwell for several days, and then was drunk after dinner. From the new day on, the two are obliged to sleep together. The girl was horrified. Her routine was bad. This would cause problems. The man would probably say that the woman was just in the way. Looking at her with a menacing look, they might even yell at her. The beauty turned her gaze to the sofa. If they kicked her out of bed, she wouldn't have to sleep on the floor. The green-eyed girl asked what was wrong with the piece of furniture. They were looking at it. It was strange. The woman decided to ask about the butler. He should have arrived by now if the information had been passed on to him. Anna spoke with him, but received a strange answer in response. The young man, as it turned out, only needed to wait 5 hours before visiting the woman. The beauty didn't know what this meant. Perhaps Pavel blurted it out without thinking. There was no need to worry about it. Anna was calling him for dinner, and it was time. The chef cooked for Milady with all his heart, so she enjoyed the delicacies. Exactly 5 hours passed, during which time the woman realized that the words about the time were true. As the maid said, the young man entered exactly at the appointed minute. The first thing the man did was introduce himself, because it seemed they had never met or spoken before, and it seemed that getting close to the hero would not be easy. He looked unusual. Literally, a second later, the man gave an answer to a question that had never been asked. He said that blank was his younger brother, which is probably what the lady thought of when she looked at her friend. It took a little while to understand that they were talking about the one who was replacing Altier at the ceremony due to his busy schedule. The butler suggested calling him by name, just as the Lord himself does. Without giving him a chance to open his mouth again, the handsome man placed a stack of papers on the table. He brought the castle's accounts for 3 years. He thought it would be interesting to know what the situation was like there. The blonde had the keys to the warehouse, although it was empty. Blue-eyed nodded. She asked point-blank if her guesses were true, and if things in the estate were not so good. The lands were not in the most favorable territory. This affected all possible areas. It's worth looking around to see what's wrong. The harvest isn't as rich here, so they have to resort to additional sources of income, such as magical hunting, when goblins and griffins descend from Dragon Mountain and blockade the western part of the empire. If they appear near the lands, the knights are in charge. Their work is not much different from the work of mercenaries. The woman nodded, although she could not believe that the squad received money for the tasks. The current situation of the estate is truly horrifying, and even the story did not clarify the situation much. All that the lady realized was that there are no regular sources of income, and magical creatures do not appear on schedule. Pavel nodded. The girl generally knew what they were talking about, and this was something special. The man suggested going for a walk. It was much better to explore everything on your own than to hear about it many times from another person. Of course, the idea turned out to be good. It didn't show anything terrible. The lady gave her consent, but she planned to do it later. The main focus was on the documents that were brought to her. Blue-eyed didn't know how to approach the butler, so she used calm solutions, trying to follow all the rules. She married a man unknown to her lives, in an unfamiliar place, but since this happened, she wants to know as much as possible. Nadia wants to give it her all and wants help with that. The work must be fruitful. The young man froze. He has a strange expression on his face, and for some reason, he decided not to say anything. The woman is worried that she gave too much away. After a few seconds, the blonde smiled warmly. The work would go extremely well, he was sure of it. The butler hoped that Wayne would take care of his subordinates, Alsford and her husband. His eyes sparkled with disbelief. Was it her imagination? Or did the young man smile? It was pleasant. The man would try his best to ensure that the enthusiasm of the arriving aristocrat did not wane. He suggested starting with studying the material. The hero's expression became serious again. The lady couldn't help but notice it. She was distracted, but since it was time to begin, she had to focus on business. The two immersed themselves in papers that foreshadowed a long, tiring day. A lot of time passed. The lady tore herself away from another paper. She realized that the sun outside had long since set. Evening had come. She clung so greedily to the statistics that she did not even notice how quickly time flew by leaving no trace of the sun. After stretching a little, the woman exhaled with a peaceful smile. It seemed she had overexerted herself a little. She should have stopped a little earlier. The beauty looked around. She needed to improve her vision a little after hours of reading. A distorted image of Anna popped into her head, telling her that the Lord was going to spend the night in the room with his wife. The girl instantly froze in horror. She was beginning to understand what was going on. Blue-eyed doesn't understand what to do next. Everything is mixed up in her head, and because of this, a wave of worries begins. She got so carried away with the documents that she forgot that she would sleep with Altair at night, and finally, after all this time, they will have intimacy. Nadia tries to calm herself with simple explanations. She shouldn't worry so much given the whole situation. This was to be expected from the moment the heroine decided to get married. She just didn't realize that she would have to go to such great lengths. Spending the night with your husband is quite natural. Even in the capital, aristocrats spent their wedding nights together. Although Altair looks cruel and impenetrable, this does not mean that his attitude will be bad. The woman understands that at that very moment, this is the most appropriate time. It cannot be simply removed. It is not such a big problem, and she thinks about it in the evening. She went to bed, but when the morning came, the place next to her was still empty. The young man never showed up in the bedroom, even though he promised he would be there. Days passed, and he was not there the next day or later. The heroine slept alone, just like on the first day of her stay in the castle, as if no one had made a promise. Another evening came. The lady lay in bed, thinking and assuming that the scenario would repeat itself again. She was ready for anything, but still felt a slight tension to relax. She turned over on her other side and exhaled. Melissa's very words about how a man is not even capable of spending a night with a woman echoed in her head. They seemed to stick to her consciousness. The lady could not get rid of the obsessive voice. She no longer knew whether it was worth getting married at all. When the day came, Pavel went to pick up the owner of the estate. He promised that after they sorted out the paperwork, they would be given a tour of the castle. Everything as it should be. They would spend their time with maximum benefit and overcome all the difficulties quite quickly, because a wonderful route had been found. To begin with, the young man showed the living room, then the dining room, and several other rooms that seemed to be the best fit. After half an hour, the lady realized that the situation was even worse than with the documents. There was a lot of work to do, and there would be no more rest. She remembered that it was worth considering the fact that the budget was very small, even tiny. Ultimately, it all came down to a lack of funds that could speed up the process of restoring the castle. She would like the situation to be more stable. Blue Eyes thought that making money in the deserted territory would be difficult. As the butler had said, if they had such an opportunity, they would have taken advantage of the opportunity long ago. They needed another source of income that would replace magical monster hunting. The woman was distracted. She was so deeply immersed in her thoughts that she did not notice how they walked forward along the corridor. The knights live in the room they came to, and outside there is a training ground. If the heroine wishes, they can take a look. The beauty nodded. She was not going to refuse a good opportunity to do something. Altair was also training. Nadia did not understand much about fencing, but she had a feeling that he would have no equal there, given his physical training. The beauty looked around, and an idea came to her mind, to ask what was bothering her. In a calm voice, she asked where the Lord had been sleeping for the last few days. Pavel shrugged, assuming that he was spending the night in his chambers. The woman lowered her head sadly. She had to tell the truth. The man had not appeared in his chambers for the last few days. Unfortunately, this was a truth that she would like to change somehow. The young man reacted a little strangely. He looked a little angry instead of answering the girl. He went to the edge of the balcony and shouted to the Lord. The young man ordered him to clean up one of the rooms. He probably spent the night there without telling anyone about it. The brunette started shouting back, showing that he was angry. The knights were training with him right now, but the hero interrupted, disturbing him. It didn't matter to the man where he slept, and Pavel shouldn't have cared either. The assistant said that Nadia was interested in this. The hero, hearing his wife's name, perked up and asked again if it was true. At that moment, their eyes met. The woman didn't understand why her husband was angry. His gaze was incredibly frightening, although she tried to control herself as best she could. The conversation didn't continue. He returned to his training. The aristocrat began to realize what was really going on. The man had been deliberately avoiding his wife without explaining why. It was sad when this realization came, but it was better not to think about the bad. Perhaps the young man didn't want to cause any inconvenience. He wanted to be a gentleman. The news about the shared room frightened Nadia incredibly, and she was stupid enough to show her emotions. His grace turned away abruptly. The knights were surprised by this, but for Wayne, this was not news. She realized that she was simply indifferent to her husband. Alas, this is true. The man was probably tired of the lady's stupid behavior. She couldn't help but doubt it. Pavel asked her not to worry. She still decided to tell the truth. The lady recently made a mistake. She got out of the bath naked, without even thinking that now she would not be alone in the room. The butler screamed in horror, as if what was said had truly shocked him. He did not believe that the master had seen his naked wife. The girl tried to justify herself. At first, she thought that Anna had come. If she had known that it was not the maid, she would never have come out. The blue-eyed woman was frightened by the reaction. She had seriously screwed up, she had understood before. But the gentleman's assistant clarified the situation, writing everything out and putting it all into perspective. The woman couldn't believe that someone so calm could react so violently. Everyone knows what aristocrats desire. Every noble man would like a pure and innocent girl as his wife, who could dispel making him feel inspired. Nadia walked around the room without clothes. Her husband could not like this. Wayne blamed herself more and more, saying that she should have behaved differently. Instead of running away from the situation, she should take care of it herself. The lady jumped up from the spot, promising that she would return. She urgently needed to meet with Alsford. The lady runs down the stairs, hoping that the brunette is still on the training ground, trying to hurry. She will be able to meet her eyes quickly. Spotted the handsome man. He was already standing at the door, getting ready to leave. The main character accidentally tripped on a step. She realized that now she would meet face to face with the ground. The girl seemed to be floating in the air, thinking that this is how this life would end. A second later, she felt nothing, not understanding why. Instead of the floor, she felt something soft. The woman accidentally hit her husband, who fell to the ground instead of her, but she simply landed on his chest, raising an eyebrow. The young man asks with displeasure if Nadia will continue to lie on him, apologizing. She shouts that she is getting up right now, so as not to cause more inconvenience. The little girl was about to jump up, but felt that she couldn't. She suddenly felt a weakness in her legs that didn't allow her to move. It became difficult to breathe from fear, and this was a problem. A calm voice was heard. The man ordered to say something. The blue-eyed girl was probably in such a hurry to say something because the brunette wanted to hear the news as soon as possible, without wasting any time. The girl is shaking. Her husband's face is too close. His eyes remain just as angry. She wants to ask what's wrong, but in her heart, she understands that her fall has ruined his mood even more. The woman announced that she is leaving. Alsford asked again, doubts showing on his face. Nadia said that she was the one who made a mistake. It would be better if she left the room in which she lived. Still belonged to a man. She had no right to kick him out like that, literally forcing him with her actions. The young man left the bedroom because of his wife. She no longer wanted to cause him discomfort by leaving him to sleep in other rooms. Altair didn't understand what mistake they were talking about. It was strange to him, but the realization didn't help in any way. The girl decided to remind her that on that day, she took off her clothes after taking a bath and walked around the room just like that. After that, her husband no longer appeared in the bedroom, and then he didn't want to see her at the training ground either, demonstratively turning away and starting to ignore her. The brunette cleared his throat. The image of Nadia in her beautiful form was still fresh in his head. Blushing a little, he decided to explain that the reason why he was sleeping in another place was because he couldn't hold back, and if he couldn't, the inevitable would happen. If you think about it, it is still connected with the beauty, but it is not so simple, the young man reassured. From now on, there is no point in judging by someone else's behavior. Whether she did well, nothing terrible happened that day. The woman simply realized that she was mistaken in her feelings. The blue-eyed woman was involuntarily surprised. She looked straight into the eyes, trying to find the truth there. For the first time, Altair became so open to the lady, Or was she just sleeping, after all they were? In reality, the words would remain. The brunette brought her out of her thoughts, asking if the girl understood everything. They were still sitting on the ground, so he helped the girl get up. The beauty nodded, and before she could say anything, she sneezed. Because of what happened, Alsford perked up, grabbing his wife by the hand. The man promised that he would now take the lady to the doctor, so that they would all feel better. The woman began to resist. She sneezed because she was worried everything was fine with her health. The hero froze, asking again if this was true. Altair noticed that the girl was full of surprises. He already had a description of Nadia in his head, but she kept adding more and more new ideas. Silence fell on the sight. A light cough was heard, and it turned out that Pavel was nearby, who had been standing there for a long time. Only then did the head of the estate realize that the lady had been wandering around the castle with the butler, and he asked the blonde to go with him. There wasn't much time left, he needed to follow the plan. The lady explained that she had managed to look around a few days later, and she considered this a good thing. The gentleman asked her to warn him about such excursions in the future. The lady nodded, and she would ask permission to take walks around the area so as not to spoil her husband's mood. The brunette shook her head, and it turned out he wasn't asking for permission. He was talking about something else. The girl didn't understand what he meant, and they didn't answer her. Instead, they asked Pavel to take Nadia back, to which they immediately agreed. The man explained to the mistress of the estate that they were going to go to a place she had never seen before. Smiling, the lady nodded. She would like to visit some interesting objects. The hero led her forward along the corridor. Before that, they said goodbye to the gentlemen. Blank arrived to see Alsford. His training had also finished. They were talking about something important, but the lady standing to the side could not say what the topic was between them. The woman decided that she would walk carefully, so as not to distract them and not get caught in the heat of the moment. The lady ordered Paul to be quiet and follow her. The knight was angry with the master because he found out that he was sleeping in another place, because he did not know whether he was contained and would not make a mistake. He did not understand what this even meant. In his opinion, it seemed like nonsense. The blonde begged the guy to do that very thing after all. That's why he got married. The brunette took a stance, believing that it was wrong. There was no law that forced one to belong to marriage. No matter how long he tried to stop, he didn't want to force a woman. It was time to talk about more important things. The hero hit his subordinate on the knee with his shoe, just to shut him up. He began to nod, declaring that the master was right, but he still needed to try harder, and more diligently. It was better for him to be like a male peacock, which attracts the attention of a female. Alsford thought about it seriously, but it didn't change anything, because he still had a lot of problems. Every time the young man opened his mouth, something terrible happened. He didn't even know what to do in such a case. No one except the head understood his worries. The beauty is constantly frightened. She might think something completely wrong. The knight explained that she should be friendlier and more gentle, constantly smile brightly, because this will not be something difficult. The assistant even showed by his own example how this should be done. The brunette grimaced. He didn't like it. The interlocutor began to get indignant. He would never have just smiled at a dark-skinned man. But women really like that kind of thing. Thinking about it, the hero realized that blank was really popular among aristocrats, and not only he continued to press. Since the example had already been shown, it was time to try to do something different. The young man showed with his fingers that he needed to raise the corners of his lips and appear cute. The gentleman did not understand why he should do something like that. It was strange. An image of Nadia came into his head, so sad and scared, like a defenseless bunny. Alsford didn't understand if it was really so frightening. He never wanted to scare his own wife so much that she would not want to be around him later. Still having agreed, the young man decided to at least try. He smiled, but this only scared Blanc, because his look was even more frightening. Stuttering a little, the hero decided to tell the truth what he thought. Of course you can't say what's in your head outright, but he understood that it would be the right thing to do. It was scary to be around, considering how it looked. It was better never to do that in front of his wife, otherwise she would be forced to flee the estate back to the capital. Milord really didn't want to listen to criticism, so in addition to the knee, he also hit the knight on the forehead and nose. The young man screamed that there was no living place left on him, condemning him directly. But in any case, this wouldn't help. The main character always does whatever he wants. That same day, Blank urgently gathered Altair's subordinates. Surely everyone who had been at the training session had already seen that the future of Alsford was under threat, and for the sake of the land and the lord, they would have to unite to improve the situation. Everyone understood that if things continued like this, the gentleman would not be able to kiss his wife, let alone have a child. They could barely hold hands. It was too problematic. Blank ordered everyone to be silent. He brought a board with him, and the meeting dedicated to birth issues began. On the agenda was the question of how to bring Nadia and Alsford closer together. Pavel was also invited, but he didn't really like what was happening. He got caught in the crossfire because his brother turned out to be the stupidest one. The blonde man kept asking who among those present had ideas. One of the knights suggested telling Wayne how good Altair is. They say that even a mystical goblin can be summoned by 3 people. Everything will work out. The lady will look at him from a different perspective when she learns something good. An argument broke out in the hall. Someone thought that this would simply deceive the girl. The Baron was not a bad person. The smartest ones suggested slipping drinks and locking the couple in a room alone. The idea was not bad, but Alsford does not get that drunk. After a while, the knights realized that they couldn't come up with anything worthwhile, which greatly upset them. A familiar voice was heard, asking if the guys were really only capable of stupid ideas. Kane, who is considered an expert on relationships, decided to enter the game decisively. The man smiled. According to the ladies of the estate, he was the 3rd most attractive of all in existence. Some thought that this was an incorrect rating, but he of course did not see a problem with this. Standing in the middle of the room, the young man began asking if anyone knew the surest way to make anyone fall in love with him. They began to attack him, saying there was no point in dragging it out. It was better to get straight to the point. They decided to tell the truth. Someone who would like to be liked needs help in a difficult situation. When they are having a hard time, when they are tired, another person can become the only lifeline and instantly win their heart. Now everything has become clear, but still not completely. Those gathered decided to develop a strategy based on what the knight was telling them. Nadia would run into trouble, and then Alsford would come to her aid. Pavel chuckled. The idea wasn't bad, but the gentleman would hardly agree to deliberately put the lady in an awkward position. Kane smiles. They will have to take action without the Lord's knowledge. The operation will be completely secret. An unsuspecting Wayne went to the lake. It really was beautiful there. Anna was right when she promised that a walk in the fresh air would lift her spirits. Sitting in the estate, the lady was thinking about how to gain Altair's favor, but she couldn't think of anything. Her thoughts consumed her so much that she felt sad Anna arrived at the most opportune moment, and she helped. Lately, the lady had managed to read an endless number of books, and it only grew. The lady asked to be allowed to rest. She deserved it. At first, the girl was hesitant, but when she went outside, she finally realized that her worries had easily disappeared. At the lake, the maid showed her joy that the beauty had agreed to go out with her. The brunette found a boat and was about to row it, while the heroine enjoyed the scenery, the girl impressed with her skills. After some time, the two found themselves closer to the mountains. Nadia admitted to herself that the mountain slope looks much more wonderful when it is a meter away from her. In the novel, Altair was rich because he explored a mine with magical stones located in this area. He discovered the Stone of Return. That treasure was the only one that could charge magical items. It was considered a rare and incredibly expensive artifact. The gentleman who discovered the mine became the owner of untold riches. In this regard, he was lucky. Even noblemen born with golden spoons in their mouths would envy such a thing. It would be difficult if, under the circumstances, a man were to find treasures on his own. Nadia was obliged to help him, because such a gesture would certainly be appreciated. She was now a baroness, so she would not be offended, but on the contrary, she would receive protection. The girl must do her part well to be safe. Anna cried out sharply. She brought the lady back to reality. The maid explained that everything happened because of an unexpected weakness in her hand. She let go of the oar she was warming. The woman looked like an actress in the theater. When she asked what to do, she thought that, if there was a knight next to them, everything would be fine. The blue-eyed woman raised an eyebrow in a silent question. She should worry about her assistant's condition. The beauty asked not to worry too much. She was about to jump and get the oar, since she knows how to swim. When the lady ended up in the water, the maid began to scream even louder, not understanding what she was doing. The woman decided to hurry and get the item before Anna felt even worse. A strange feeling enveloped her body, something the lady hadn't expected. For some reason, she felt as if her body was getting heavier and was gradually starting to sink to the very bottom. The knights brought the gentleman to the shore. He was dissatisfied the whole way to the river, asking what was so interesting. There Blank lied that there was a group of goblins nearby that should be dealt with. The brunette didn't know why they had to put on this whole circus. He ordered the performance to stop and to explain why it was necessary to lure them by hook or by crook to the pond. The knights pretended not to understand, but it was written on their faces. They were worried. Obviously, they weren't going to answer, and that made them even more angry. Training was coming too easily for them, and if that were the case, the young man would try to make it more difficult so that next time there wouldn't even be a thought of cheating. His eyes were shining with a terrifying light again. The man values those around him, so he decided to conduct a training fight. The guys froze in horror. When they heard this, they realized that it was a one-sided attack that would be used directly on them. The brunette decided to give one last chance to answer correctly. The first one to tell the truth would be freed from beatings. Cain was the first to raise his hand, promising that he would retell the whole truth. Blank pushed him away, shouting that the idea to lure the gentleman to the shore belonged to the knight in dark. The guys were making up all sorts of nonsense again. The hero had long ago realized that if he left, they wouldn't just let it go. A scream was heard that distracted him from the squabble. The voice was calling the lady, so the gentleman was surprised. Most likely his wife was involved. From the shore, the young man noticed pink hair, but it was barely visible from under the water. The lady was indeed drowning. The knights also froze in horror. Everything had not turned out as planned. They had had a completely different plan. According to what the assistants of the head of the estate came up with, Alsford should have arrived on time, and after that handed over the oar that Anna had thrown away. This would have led to her gratitude, and the couple would have been together. Everything should have been different, but now the lady somehow drowns in the water. They realized that it was more important to save the lady now. By the time the boys came to, the milord was no longer there. He jumped up, rushed into the river, and pulled out the girl who seemed to be unconscious due to the water that had gotten into her lungs. The young man screamed, trying to make his wife wake up, but nothing helped. Cain was ordered to call a doctor, but he was hanging around doing nothing instead of hurrying up and carrying out the order. The man's voice trembled. He noticed that it seemed the beauty was not breathing. So the doctor would not have time without thinking twice. The brunette bent down, starting to perform artificial respiration. His only wish was for the lady to open her eyes and finally begin to breathe. A few seconds later, Nadia started coughing. Water splashed out. Blank said that the doctor would arrive soon. The young man decided not to stay where he was by the river. The blue-eyed girl was already fine, but not completely, because her body was still icy. The hero was afraid that something terrible would happen, the same as in childhood. Once again, he tried to throw off the obsession now. The situation is completely different. He needs to understand this. No matter what happens, the woman will be protected at any cost. The girl feels incredibly stuffy. Strange sensations do not leave her body before she was freezing, but for some reason, now it has become unbearably hot. She understands that she needs to try to take off the blanket. Her hand reaches for the neck. Someone's hand stopped her attempts. A calm voice informed her that the doctor had asked the girl to warm up, which meant not to throw off the blanket. Her head hurt so much that the heroine was unable to remember anything. She looked through the veil, hoping that she would understand who was in front of her. The beauty is so ill that her condition is no longer the same. The man is cruel since he does not allow her to remove the blanket. Her weak voice strains to express her feelings. Her face has become even redder. Her condition seems to be worsening, although this is not the case. Alsford nodded. He understood how his wife was feeling, but he also knew from the doctor that she was delirious from the cold. They wouldn't let her take off her outer layers of clothing, because then it would be even worse. But only later, it would be much easier to endure. The girl needs to take medication to come to her senses and raise her body temperature. There are no medications in the room. She will have to wait until they bring them for now. The young man put his hand on the woman's forehead to make sure how bad it is. The beauty's reaction was the same as when she drank too much. The girl pressed herself against his palm. The brunette exhaled. He was going to go crazy again. Nadia was still unconscious. There was no point in talking to himself. He knew that after waking up, he would hardly be able to remember anything. In fact, the woman understood what was happening, but too vaguely. The hero put a pill in his mouth, leaning over. He kissed the beauty, doing it as tenderly as possible, and pulling away, the gentleman explained that after that, she could get some sleep. The blue-eyed girl opened her eyes, but still didn't understand what had happened. She liked the touch, but she didn't know what group it belonged to. Something had definitely been done to her, but of course there would be no answer to the question. Milord carefully left the chambers and went to the training ground where the knights were located. They had received punishment, so they were kneeling with their hands raised high. They were ordered to be quiet because Nadia had just begun to fall asleep. The brunette turned away. He himself did not understand why he was behaving like this. He had to force his subordinates to engage in such nonsense, but if you think twice, it becomes clear that they are not to blame for anything. A cry distracted him from his thoughts. Pavel arrived to the master, and when he was asked what was the matter, his facial expression changed dramatically. It turned out that an annoying guest had arrived. He was not ashamed to come at an hour when no one was expected in the castle. Lowering his voice, the blonde reminded that only one individual could have shown up so late. Sir Balhal had arrived uninvited. The gentleman chuckled, and he was against it. First, the man had sent hired killers, and now he had decided to check out the situation himself. Alsford had no choice. He couldn't send him away without talking. He exhaled and prepared himself for the meeting. They would go to see what kind of nonsense the impostor would come up with. This time, the butler agreed and promised that he would prepare clothes. Alter's relative acted as if he was at home. He sat on the sofa, crossed his legs, and said out loud that the living room did not at all resemble what an aristocrat should have. He would have to redo everything so that it no longer looked pathetic. The owner of the estate finally entered the room and asked from the doorway what had brought Balhal to him. The brunette snorted. The relative hadn't changed. The old-fashioned ornaments looked worse than one could have imagined. Sitting down opposite his acquaintance, Alter notes that such behavior is unacceptable. If the man came to ask questions and argue, he can leave. It's time to get down to business, because the boss, unlike the guest, has his own concerns. The uncle reminds him that he is his relative and asks him not to be rude, but rather to behave with dignity. The interlocutor winced, thinking that there is no problem since he is the owner of Alsford, and he should be treated with more dignity. Balhal exhaled, trying to contain the surge of anger that was bursting out again. He decided to play his trump card. The guy considers himself smart, but he didn't invite a single relative to his wedding. As it turned out, the brunette had chosen his bride himself, but such decisions should be made by the whole family. Without letting the guest finish, the young man interrupted, asking again what he meant. He wonders what the so-called close people would be discussing if they were truly the ones who cared about Altair, and if they weren't trying to take away the rest of the lands and other property he had after the boy lost his parents 10 years ago. The uncle began to cough, trying to say something. Alsford knew that the boy would not have the right words because he looked like a snake, one of those who was so desperately trying to take away the lands and assets of the family was Balgal's father. The man remembered how they took everything they could from him after that fire. His life turned upside down one day. The castle was engulfed in flames. In an attempt to put out the fire, people drew water from the lake. They hoped to save at least something. The exit from the master bedroom was blocked. A beam collapsed due to the flames. A 12-year-old boy lost his parents. He remembers that day as if it happened yesterday. Nothing will change that. The boy developed a talent for fencing in early childhood, and he made a name for himself in the East, based solely on this. Unfortunately, this fact had no effect at all, because on that day before the fire that captured his parents, he was unable to do anything. Then, a real nightmare began. All that awaited him on the threshold was the hard life of a baron, filled with helplessness and sadness, which could not be replaced by true happy feelings, which were absent pain, and sadness became the only reality. On the very first day, many relatives appeared, each demanding something Altair's father and mother owed them, so they would have to pay either with money or land. The people around did nothing but bite off a piece. Those gathered called the boy by name to win him over, and played at being friends, but in reality, they were cleverly taking away everything he had. And when he finally came to his senses, after his grief over his parents and what had happened, he realized that he was left with absolutely nothing. The man realized that he shouldn't bend over backwards for others. He had enough of the time he still had to pay for with his poverty. He severed all ties with his named relatives. Balhal, a greedy snob, wasn't satisfied with the lands he had taken from him. He even aimed for the title of baron. At first, the young man didn't understand whether his friend would be able to do anything, but then he realized that if Altair didn't have an heir, the throne would be inherited by an impudent man. The boy's uncle was angry that he had married after all, since he had deliberately spread rumors. He hoped that no one would marry a poor man, but for some reason, a girl from the Marquis's family wanted to become his wife. She ruined all the plans since the young man was no longer alone. There was nothing to be done. The guest offered to show him the bride and introduce him to her, so that there would be at least some contacts. Alsford was interested in what his uncle was thinking, and finally, he showed that his head was a mess. He would never let him see the woman, so it was better to get away right away. The brunette started shouting. He didn't mention that he brought something important. There was a beautiful envelope on the table. The Eastern Union of Nobles sent an invitation in honor of the wedding. It will be hunting season soon, so we will have to go there together. The hero calmly took the sheet of paper and squeezed it hard, then threw it back. This was a good excuse for a visit. Since his uncle had done his job, it was time for him to leave. The master was not going to tolerate him in his estate. The aristocrat couldn't calm down. He didn't understand how anyone could refuse. His nephew should understand that his capital city wife was used to all sorts of events, and perhaps she even missed them. Marriage with someone whose estates are empty, and besides located outside the city, it must be incredibly boring. Balhal expresses his pity for the lady. She cannot even go out anywhere, only because of Alsford, who is used to living on his own, in silence. The brunette thought for a moment. Although he didn't think his relative's words would make him doubt what was happening in the capital, he couldn't imagine the girl giggling for so long while meeting people and interacting with them with complete calm. Deep down, the guest was glad that it seemed his provocation had worked. He didn't know who this girl was, but if she had decided to marry the one everyone had nicknamed the castrated pauper, then she definitely needed to be dragged out to the most public place possible. Balhal is going to ridicule the unfortunate couple right in front of everyone. He would like to see his nephew's proud face blush with shame. Most likely the hero noticed that mercenaries were sent to him, but he did not find any direct evidence since he does not push forward. Before leaving, the brunette stated that he knew about the arrival of the third orc prince. The baron would have a rare opportunity to meet with members of the royal family, so he would also have to take his wife so as not to receive another portion of aggression. The young man declared that he had a lot of things to do and ran away. Altair remained in his thoughts about hunting competitions. The lady slowly opened her eyes. Her eyelids felt like they were filled with lead. Anna almost immediately ran up to the beauty. She was lucky that she entered the chambers in time. The sun was shining brightly outside. Rubbing her eyes, the beauty asked how long she had slept. The maid, still looking worried, stated that a whole day had passed. According to the doctor, when the girl entered the water, she already had a cold, so her body was under serious stress. The girl realized that she hadn't sneezed out of embarrassment when she fell on her husband. She had been feeling a little ill, and that was precisely what had provoked this. The beauty decided that she was lucky that everything hadn't ended as badly as it could have. The maid wanted to know why the woman had jumped into the river in the first place. It was strange of her. She should have left the oar and not behaved that way. The girl reminded her that Anna had been scared. She knew how to swim, so if she hadn't been sick, she would have been able to retrieve what had fallen. The brunette realized that tears were welling up in her eyes. It didn't matter whether she was scared then or not. Safety was far more important than any of the beauty's wishes. Next time she shouldn't do that. The mistress interrupted, explaining that all lives are equally important. No matter how strong the class system is, one cannot judge the value of a person's life. The blue-eyed woman promises that even if she understood, she would still do the same again just to help the maid. It would be nice if she didn't get sick. Anna started to sob. It was like a flood from that moment. She promised that she would definitely be on the lady's side if others decided to cooperate. The beauty would never agree and would not listen to the strange people around. The green-eyed girl faltered when she realized that she had said too much. The girl was brought to the lake because Blank and Kane asked for it. Of course, they did not want to harm. They just hoped that the relationship between my lord and my lady would improve. Anna mentioned Alsford because it was he who saved the woman. As soon as he learned that she was in danger, without hesitation, he jumped into the lake after her. The girl remembers that someone pulled her out of the water, literally a second before she lost consciousness. The moment she found herself in his arms, a great relief overtook her, which helped her breathe a sigh of relief. The blue-eyed girl confessed to the maid that she remembered absolutely nothing. Only fragments of memories remained. The maid was angry inside, as expected. The night's plan had failed. The girl asked about her husband. The water in the lake was quite cold. He could even catch a cold. Hearing this, the brunette laughed out loud. A man has been free from illness his entire life. Such a healthy fellow. My lord is an exception to the rule. He will remain healthy even if the whole world catches some kind of infection. This is rare, but for him it is considered absolutely normal. After some time, the lady finally left the room. She felt so much better that she was able to get up. The girl kept thinking about the maid's words. She did not believe that there were people who did not get sick at all. Doubts were eating away at her more and more, forcing her to want to see for herself. The girl doesn't believe the man. He could simply be trying to earn respect among the servants and pretend to be fresh and healthy, when in reality, everything is completely different. The woman decided to quickly go check if her husband's health is okay. Milady was stopped by voices behind her. She turned and noticed Blanc and Cain. They were standing in an unusual position, so the girl asked why they were both on their knees, raising their hands up. This had never happened to them before, at least not in front of her eyes. The boys left the training hall where they were, because they heard that the mistress of the estate had finally woken up. They were punished for putting Nadia in danger, although it seemed like there would be a lot of trouble, but luckily she was okay. The blue-eyed girl raised an eyebrow in displeasure. She jumped into the water herself. Without asking anyone, she was sorry that she had to make the guys worry. There was no need to apologize. Of course, it was better to get up and talk about everything calmly. The beauty's head suddenly began to ache. She clutched her temple. Two of them immediately began to suggest that she rest and call a doctor to sort things out. The heroine smiled warmly, because she realized that the knights were really trying to take care of her as best they could. The girl remembers her life in the estate in the capital, in the family of Marquis Wayne. There were also many knights, but it seems that compared to those stern people, Alsford's subordinates are much friendlier. They care because they themselves are kind as they are. The blue-eyed girl decided to explain herself so as not to cause even more concern, simply because the girl had been lying there for too long, and she felt a little dizzy when she stood up, and the two began asking again, with even more enthusiasm, clarifying the details. The problem was still detected. Everything showed that the body was still very weak. The woman expected a different reaction, so she began to try to explain that she was not particularly weak. After all, it is normal for girls to have mild anemia. The two of them still didn't hear anything. They were actively discussing what they would need to do next. If they called the doctor, just because the lady was a little unsteady, people might misunderstand, or think that Alsford was very ill. The woman once again screams that she is really okay. A familiar voice is heard asking what is going on. Altair appears in the hallway, reminding that the wife should have rested more. She remembered that she was not allowed to leave the bedroom, but she wanted to see her husband. She didn't have time to wait and check. Later, the Baron said that he came to the lake to help the beauty. She fell ill because of this, so she was worried if everything was okay with the Lord. As a sign of gratitude, it was also worth saying a sincere thank you. The woman doesn't know why she's shy and stutters only in front of him. It all seems too strange turning away. The Lord said something quickly enough not to focus on it. Concern is ridiculous. He's nothing more than a trifle. The knights couldn't help but notice how the gentleman blushed. The man's complexion was truly good. The girl was happy that he wasn't hurt, because of her silence fell in the corridor. The two looked at each other, showing all the emotions that were bursting to come out. The beauty turned around. Now that everything was over, it was time for her to return to her chambers. The young man ran up and picked her up in his arms. It was clear that the lady was going to go work with documents, but he had to make sure that she slept better. The knights standing behind her remark that they will be fairly punished again. The woman doesn't like this turn of events. She asks him to stop and listen. Nothing happened 10 minutes later. She was lying in bed again, completely covered with a blanket. She feels good now, but it seems that in Altair's eyes she is weak. The man was silent for a long time, until they decided to talk about life in the capital. He became interested in what the lady did in her free time. Perhaps she was relaxing, but she also went out somewhere. The beauty was involuntarily surprised. It was strange that the hero decided to ask such strange questions. Usually the woman read books or walked in general, did ordinary things that attracted the attention of every aristocrat. The girl did not take into account one important fact. She constantly avoided any family gatherings due to her shyness, believing that it would be better to lock herself in her chambers. She could not stand crowds of people. Blue-eyed would like to tell the whole truth, but as sad as it may sound, she physically could not complete this task. A man will not like a wife who does not know how to communicate, so she will have to continue to remain silent. The young man was distracted from his thoughts. Knowing how to attract a person's attention, he handed over an envelope. The hunting season would soon begin. The palace received an invitation from the Eastern Noble Union. Soon it would have to be visited. He needed to be prepared. The girl tried not to stutter, and quietly asked if this meant that all the influential people of the East would gather at that event. The answer was a calm nod. When she was in the capital, she couldn't attend even a small meeting, and now it turned out she would have to be in a huge open space. The very thought made her head spin, and to keep from giving up completely, the lady begged herself to calm down. After becoming a baroness, events were duties. Altair was probably expecting nothing more than that, especially since others would be gathering around because of the hunting season. Conversations are expected to be on the topic of the gathering, not on secular matters. Although the aristocrats call their time together hunting in the end, they only have the goal of raising their spirits, and the targets are also mainly small animals, such as rabbits and foxes. Another problem has arisen, which is truly frightening. The lady instantly loses consciousness as soon as she sees any kind of blood, no matter how elegantly the hunt is wrapped in a wrapper, it still remains the same. The lady has no other choice but to see what she fears. Blue Eyes realized that she would have to train hard to adapt to the blood before the hunting season. She assures that she will cope doing everything possible for a small success. The man explained that it was better to be yourself without trying to go beyond the established boundaries. He reported another piece of news. The third prince would be present at the event. Perhaps the lady was also acquainted with him. The Orca prince is not in good health or constitution, so he is gradually undergoing treatment, and he will remain in the east to get some rest. The lady cannot admit that she knows the man very well. He was once with Lord Altair, and a traitor. The guy is another villain of the novel, in which the heroine finds herself. His name is Orca Loops. The girl remembered very well the plot of the novel, because the young man was lagging far behind in the race for the throne, because his health was really failing him. No one knew the truth, because all the doctors, as one, repeated the same thing without stopping. As it turned out, the man used his treatment as an excuse to wander around the empire. He actively gathered potential supporters willing to help. He was a man with ambitions that not everyone was able to notice. The most important figure of this man was precisely Altair. The guy became the sword of the third prince. He flooded the capital with the blood of numerous kings and other noble persons. He did this fully aware of what awaited him next. As expected, the main character will be swept away by a bloody riot, and then her head will be cut off. The memories make her shudder all over her body. It becomes more terrible. Returning from her thoughts, the lady clarified with her husband when the selection for the hunting convention will take place. The figure of 2 months was frightening, although it was neither a long nor a short time. Soon there would be a meeting between the one who would become the villain and the one who would lead him down a sinister path. The blue-eyed girl was afraid that the end would be the same as in the novel, but she didn't know how to prevent it. A herd of goosebumps ran across her skin. It became more difficult to breathe. The woman does not know whether she can truly survive the meetings that promise to be strong. She herself did not notice how she began to tremble. Her face instantly turned pale, attracting her husband's attention. The brunette asks, "To just rest first. It's really important to him." The little girl understood that there was no choice anyway, so she nodded, lowering herself back onto the soft pillows. The woman said she'd try to fall asleep as quickly as possible, but despite saying so, she couldn't. Thinking about the future and Orc, she couldn't fall asleep. I wondered if the boys would be close after their first meeting on the hunt. In the book, events slowed down only after the two went to war together, becoming a little closer. The pink-haired girl doesn't know if there's some unsolved plot yet. It's unclear whether they knew each other before the war broke out. A calm voice was heard, asking her to stop. The blue-eyed woman opened her eyelids slightly, while her husband continued. He could hear the maiden's thoughts, even from afar. There were still 2 months left until the Eastern Noble meeting, and there was no point in thinking about that so early. For the brunette, everything is not so clear-cut. He calmly asks her to recover quickly and have a good rest while she still has the will to do so. The girl did not have time to answer anything before her eyes were closed, not allowing her to open them. The hand on her forehead was too warm. The beauty felt incredibly pleasant to feel it. This had never happened before. She did not quite understand how one could be a villain in a novel and at the same time have such warm palms. It was impossible to say that she did not like it at all. The night passed, which was not so restless. The next day came. The woman went out into the corridor, realizing that there was some strangeness. She was still thinking about what happened in the novel. She just could not stop. The girl wanted to know Altair teamed up with the third prince and became a villain. The main character, being a good person, decided to consider several possible scenarios. The first was, of course, simply an expression of interest, due to Orc's interesting name, for which reason the young man could show more loyalty. Orca could also seduce the man with the royal family's enormous wealth. There is a possibility that Altair needed political power. The third option has not yet been determined, but he does not need to worry about the second point, because soon the girl will help discover the mine. The beauty understood that with the treasures, they would become the richest in the lands, so the first point remained. The novel did not say that the prince was attractive, but if he took the smile off his face and opened his eyes, everyone would see that he was a terrible person. He looked like a fox in human form. Even if the first option is true, the heroine doesn't know how to prevent a rapid escalation. She tries to stop her thoughts. Because there are still 2 months until the meeting, there is enough time. Finding a mine with magical stones and making the land rich is the priority. Blue Eyes knew that she had to hurry and go to the top of the mountain to complete this mission. Asking for permission was a simple matter, but if she couldn't find the mine, part of her husband would suffer. She had to keep everything a secret and resolve everything on her own. Nadia has people who can be easily bribed. She made a plan of action and almost immediately went to the hall where the knights train. Blank turned away when the fight was over. The training went well. He noticed the lady and of course was surprised that she decided to visit them. Everyone around was immediately distracted. When they heard the cherished words, the heroine began to feel uncomfortable because everyone around did nothing but stare at her. She wanted to run away and never come back because shyness was making itself felt more and more. Instead of acting like a child, the lady knew she simply had to gather her courage and do everything in the best possible way. Opening the basket, she showed the sandwiches inside. Since everyone looked tired, she came to bring some snacks. Those gathered were surprised that my lady had prepared the food herself and even brought it in. The blue-eyed woman isn't very good at making sandwiches, but she guarantees the taste because the chef himself helped her. The man stood nearby and supervised the lady, hoping that everything would work out for her. The beauty looked sad, but calmly said that nothing would happen if the knights did not want to eat, and immediately everyone began to shout in unison to assure them that they would definitely try what they were given, and they thanked Milady from the bottom of their hearts for her kindness. When it was all over, Cain had to thank the girl again for coming to feed them. The girl was surprised they didn't owe her anything, because she was one of those who did it of their own free will. The heroine didn't expect her subordinates to be so happy it made her smile. One of the men accidentally dropped a sandwich. The blue-eyed girl froze. Perhaps her laughter seemed like mockery to them, in which case it would be best to immediately explain everything as it is. She was about to open her mouth, but she was interrupted and an altercation began. The friend of the one who dropped the food began to blame him for the fact that a whole piece was lost. The knights began to offer to pick up the sandwich after all. Not even 5 seconds had passed. The rule works. The heroine raised an eyebrow. The piece was covered in dirt. Besides, it seemed that more time had passed than they said. The brunette began to happily gobble up the food again, not intending to stand aside. Milady quietly said that if you eat dirty food, you can get an upset stomach. Everyone around knows this. But the young man declared that despite the dirt, it was still very tasty. Blank decided to speak up to ease my lady's burden a little. There were times when they had to eat inedible food. When they went on expeditions, the woman would not have to worry. The lady felt uneasy when she realized that such cases were not uncommon. The heroine heard that the squad hunted sinister creatures to earn money, but did not know that they were also contacted to participate in expeditions. The knights of the capital always dressed carefully, boasting elegant speech to attract the attention of aristocrats. The people of Alsford kept swords on the front lines for the survival of their lands. The woman realized that she couldn't delay any longer. She immediately had to earn money and free the knights from their difficult work. After all, the baroness had to take care of her people. Finally, she said in fact, she had only come to ask a favor of everyone gathered. The knights were silent, looking with wide eyes, as if expecting something. Perhaps their reaction was justified by the fact that the lady was not asking the lord. The beauty was afraid that she would not be listened to. Doubts were creeping deeper into her consciousness, and now it was getting worse. Cain came up to say that the request was something inappropriate. The heroine quietly exhaled. She nodded. The blue-eyed one was about to leave, but she was told that on the contrary, it was worth ordering directly. After all, Mistress Alsforda has every right to what she does. The words instantly warmed her heart. A smile appeared on her lips. The woman thought that she should be faithful to some role, but not everything was so easy. Being called by status is much more pleasant when subordinates do it. She would like everything to remain just as good in the future. The brunette stepped back and called Blanc to him. It was his time to speak whatever the lady wished. The knights were obliged to listen. The young man smiled, promising that they were capable of fulfilling whatever she asked. The first strategy meeting was a complete mess, but everything will get better. The heroine asked again, as if she hadn't understood. Everyone around immediately started shouting at the knight. He shouldn't have said something unnecessary like he did so as not to get himself into even more trouble. The man again asked what order he wanted to give to Milady. They should prepare to carry it out. There were strange feelings inside, something mixed. Now Nadia is the mistress of entire lands. She must do everything in her power to ensure that the situation does not end disastrously as it could have. Plucking up courage, the woman nodded. It was time to speak. As it turns out, the girl stumbled upon some information that indicates that something very valuable is hidden in the mountain range. She hopes that her subordinates will help explore the mountains by doing all the work with her. The mission would be secret, which the soldiers didn't immediately believe until they had definitive results. The lady wanted no one to know about the process, and the Lord wasn't destined to be among those in the know. Either. Blank asked what the specific purpose of the research was. The girl smiled confidently. They were going to find a mine of magic stones. Of course, they couldn't say that it was mentioned in the book, because then the whole story would fall apart. But this still didn't stop them. The knight thought about what the woman had said when they met. For some reason, he had many doubts such a mine was quite valuable. It was impossible to even imagine that such a thing existed on their lands. It was something out of the realm of fantasy. The information may be true, but if so, the man does not understand why they did not know anything about it until now. All this is gaining strange momentum. He came to the library to browse through various information about the future excavations organized by the baroness. Considering that the mountains were full of dangers, they were probably not easy to explore. And if so, the lady told the pure truth. The thoughts dragged on the hero could not tear himself away even when he entered the office of the owner of the estate. He came to his senses only when his name was loudly called. The brunette wanted to know why the hero was standing in the middle of the office wide-eyed. He didn't tell her what was going on, although that would have been nice. The young man had already opened his mouth to speak, but again remembered the lady's words explaining how he should behave even when the baron was nearby. The woman hoped for her subordinates' understanding when she asked them to keep their excavations, which were just beginning, a secret. If the man broke his promise, he would later feel bad, as if he had committed a betrayal. The blonde looked silently at the floor, still thinking. The lady said that she didn't want to bother her husband with little things, but not informing him about a significant problem would be considered wrong. Time ran out. The man realized that the decision had been made for him since his subordinate couldn't find the words. The leader decided to go first. He announced that he was planning to go to Rebirth very soon in order to catch the dragon. He had spoken about this earlier, but they didn't listen to him. Blank immediately perked up and started shouting, asking what had happened and why the gentleman had changed his mind. He had abandoned his plan not long ago. Altair calmly explained that it had to be that way. It was all because of the reward. Alsford's annual budget was at risk, and it was worth enduring a little trouble. The payment had to be substantial, but it was worth understanding that there would still be quite a lot of casualties, and in that case, this was not the best option that could exist from those proposed. The brunette nodded, he knew, so he decided to go alone without the knights to help. The leader remained calm, as if he was talking about the budget and not replenishment. Through risks, he was thinking about taking Kane and Blank with him, but that would leave the territories unprotected if gaps appeared. Balhal would probably make his move, trying to take away the status. The blonde man remains with a terrible expression on his face. He is genuinely scared. There is no denying that even if there is a lord in front of him, but still catching a dragon alone will be quite a quest. The man asks not to talk nonsense, but rather to abandon the idea before it is too late. The young man lowered his voice and asked menacingly if the assistant was really going to order his boss. After the recent refusal of the request from Romborg Command, requests for monster hunts suddenly stopped. Blank needed to know what this meant for their decision. Requests are usually like this, at least according to the guy. They have never had 3 months without any requests. So in the head's opinion, this is not normal. The knight assumes that someone interfered with the documentation, and not only, and thereby cut off ties with the country of Altair. This is probably true. The brunette is angry, but asks that no one but him worry. They simply have to play along once, and they will be ready to shell out a lot of money. There is no such thing as trying to back off at the last moment. Out of the blue, the Lord believed that nothing would happen to him. Blank understood that he had almost been persuaded to agree, but this would not be the best course of action. He understood that he had to do something. The blonde smiled, suggesting that they postpone accepting the request, at least for a while, because nothing would happen from it. No one would get hurt. The young man began from afar, stating that the master's wife had come to the training grounds in the morning and brought personally prepared sandwiches. The headmaster did not like this. He squeezed the paper tightly, asking again, and dividing each word so that his mood could be felt. The knight didn't have time to finish the most important part, because food is not important in this story. The baroness received information that in the mountains of the territories there is a mine of magic stones. Not believing it, Alsford asked again, as if he was trying to come to his senses and understand what was happening. The lady ordered to explore the mountain range in order to find the mine as soon as possible. Altair chuckled. The idea was worth checking out. He couldn't ask the woman, although he didn't understand where she found this information. The gentleman knew better what to do. He suggests conducting a preliminary study among those who have lived in Alsford for a long time. If suddenly any rumors are discovered about strange places in the mountains, the search will take place precisely in the area in which they are located. Nodding in response, the subordinate enthusiastically promised that he would immediately send people to gather information through inquiries, since it would take time. The master nevertheless decided to go catch the dragon. Blank was indignant because he revealed secret information so that the master would remain in the castle. Altair remained completely unperturbed and did not see any problem in his path. A mine of magic stones is one thing, but a feat is another. For him, there is no guarantee of success in the investigation. The young man managed to send a letter accepting the request. This is a necessary decision. There is no choice. Milord cannot allow things to be bad, and therefore will risk his life. The man is sad that everything is like this, but it seems he will not change the situation. He has accepted it, so he no longer hopes for the best. Time passed. The girl was sitting in the main hall. She was cutting meat on a plate until she stopped it. Became clear that if she did not say it, then she would never have the courage to do it again. She raised her voice, which made her husband worry. He thought that the food must be tasteless. The girl shook her head. The food, as always, was top-notch, because the chef really does cook excellently. She just wanted to express her request. The brunette raised an eyebrow because he didn't know where the topic of conversation would lead them. The woman was told the whole truth, so she started from afar. Someone said that her husband was going to go to catch a dragon. The work was very dangerous. Lowering her eyes, the beauty asked if the man could not go but stay next to her. Instead of answering his wife, the protagonist turned to the butler and threatened him not to do anything unnecessary so as not to have problems later. He was not a fool and had long ago realized what had happened, since it was Pavel who had escorted the lady into the room. The blue-eyed woman froze. She realized that she had definitely underestimated the guy's abilities. He so easily understood what needed to be done, and so easily understood that the lady had conspired with the assistant. Alas, he didn't know how to react to this. A little earlier before dinner, the blonde man asked to talk. He didn't want to ask the girl, considering that he was of lower status, but everything had come to this. He would like the heroine to invest some funds in improving the estate, but he had no plans for further development yet. The lady paused for thought. The heroine saw a serious expression on her face, and this made her understand what was being discussed. The baroness had brought funds that were her direct property. The husband should not interfere thoughtlessly. A request for investment in improving the estate was in essence a signal that something was wrong with the management of the property. The girl would be happy to help, but if a mine were discovered, funds would be needed for its development, which meant that she had no right to use the available money. The beauty had to refuse, explaining that she had already figured out where to invest the funds. Pavel nodded. He understood that he was asking for too much, but he also had his reasons. The lord was going on a dragon hunt to make money. Hearing this news, the woman perked up, expecting anything, but definitely not this. The blonde continued telling all the details. The young man would probably leave in a few days, but as is well known, hunting an animal can be so dangerous that a fatal outcome would not surprise anyone. Since the lady could not allocate funds, it was necessary to try to persuade the lord to stay in the estate. Only his wife's wishes are a husband's right to listen to. The woman nodded. She was sad to see her subordinate so upset and agitated, considering how collected he usually was. Altair was a quick thinker, so he immediately revealed the beauty's intentions during dinner. The man calmly asked not to let Pavel carry her mind too far. The baroness was under no obligation to follow his words, since of course everything wasn't as scary as he was saying. The blue-eyed woman shook her head. She wasn't entirely carried away. She was just worried about the Lord too. The hero didn't believe the words. The feelings are true. The girl is sincerely worried about Altair realizing that she can't change anything. Of course, the man may seem like a terrible villain. However, he is a good person who helped her when she was in trouble and gave her a chance when there was a feeling of oppression from everyone else. The blue-eyed woman didn't think that anyone would ever think of a man as a good person. The world seemed to have turned upside down, despite everything the lady no longer felt, fear in front of the cold gaze that used to pierce right through her. The heroine decided to explain herself, so as not to seem suspicious. Her feelings are such because they got married, and now the beauty is also considered part of Alsford, like a member of the family. She is also worried about the man, hoping that he will stay where it is safe. When the line was finished, the woman squeezed her eyes shut, hoping that it would all be over. The woman hoped that she had not jumped into the conversation with delicacy. The brunette stood up. He came closer, and as if nothing had happened, asked the girl if she had finished eating, if everything was okay. He even offered to walk her to her room. As soon as the two left the room into the hallway, the man abruptly pressed his wife against the wall. She was surprised. Such a change in mood was incomprehensible. She wanted to understand, to ask questions, but it was better to remain silent so that the situation would not worsen significantly. The brunette began to explain the purpose of his expedition, and again asked not to worry. He said that he could handle it, decided that he would do everything that came his way, and in this case, he was not going to retreat. The situation had changed, so he had no choice but to adapt to the new environment. The baroness will not remain a widow in any case. These are minor things that she should not worry about so much. This is the wrong step. The heroine listened and heeded attentively, not finding the strength to utter a word in response. Moving a few more centimeters closer, the hero carefully placed his hand on the blue-eyed woman's chin. Instead of worrying a woman could provide support like a real wife, he hoped that the beauty understood what was being discussed. A conflict arose in her head. The lady thought for a second, because she did not know what this meant. Her husband chuckled. Leaving her alone would be a mistake. He also decided to remind her of some basic rules. If guests come and the lord is absent, they are usually sent back, so as not to be left in the castle. The young man nodded. When he realized that his wife remembered all the details, he decided to check if she had thought about what they might call her. The girl chuckled. They had indeed talked about this not long ago, when they had met in the hallway in complete darkness. The brunette hoped to hear the treasured words, but of course nothing came of it. The lady was still thinking about it. The young man hoped that she would find the answer, at least before the time he returned to Alsford. Nadia nodded. She would try to complete the task. Altair stroked the lady's head and left. As always, he looked more like a good character than a villain. After all, he is a good man that day. Despite the girl's objections, the husband still did not change his plan to go on a solo mission to catch a dragon. The lady sat in the room while Anna helped comb her hair. Wayne didn't understand what would happen next. She had to think a lot about what the young man meant. He obviously wanted to be cared for as a loved one. The woman had read all the books about the manners of an aristocrat, but she couldn't find the answer. The blue-eyed woman was so tired of thinking that she desperately asked the maid if she knew what the riddle meant. The brunette shrugged her shoulders. Her only option was that the lord was worried about his upcoming battle. He was steadfast, but still probably worried that something would happen. The beauty exhaled. She seemed to understand everything. When the lady expressed concern for the lord, he asked for support this time, for real. Unfortunately, he had to leave with nothing. The green-eyed began to understand what this meant, but it seemed that the lady was still in deep thought. The baron might desire more sensible concerns, but the maid began to tell him about an Eastern custom that had existed since time immemorial. When a wife made a wish bracelet for her husband, he would set off with a calm conscience to a dangerous place on a mission. Usually, a loving couple wears the same bracelets to wish each other safety when the jewelry remains intact. It means that the spouses are safe. The blue-eyed girl chuckled with interest. She had never heard of such a thing. The girl remembers that the East is located in the border zone, where small and large wars often break out, so perhaps that is where it originated. Surely the women who weaved the bracelets experienced great pain because they were worried about their husbands going to war. The heroine noted out loud that it would not be easy to fulfill her plan. Anna encouraged her mistress, assuring her that she could do whatever she wanted. The brunette promised to quickly prepare all the necessary materials, and they would make a decoration that would not break. Altair will remain invisible, even before the fire of a furious dragon. The days passed slowly, but still 3 days ended. That was the time the man was finally getting ready to leave. The beauty went down to the platform, where the horse on which the baron would ride was already being prepared. Noticing Nadia, the young man exhaled with a drop of displeasure. He asked not to see him off, since he saw no point in it. The beauty remembered, but still wanted to see her in person. She was told that she needed to show care like a real wife, so she decided to do it. The brunette froze in surprise, not believing that they would do this right now. In the young lady's opinion, there was no need to go anywhere. Of course, there were a lot of eyes around, but if the girl wanted it that way, Altair would generally give in to his unspoken wish. The woman did not understand why she had to go somewhere just to put a bracelet on her wrist. She grabbed her husband's hand, but before doing anything, she realized that she was huge and strong, yet they were very different that could not be taken away as is. The blue-eyed woman quickly shook off the spell, realizing that it was not the time to think about something so strange. Having put on the jewelry, she explained the essence. Someone told her that in the East, there is a custom of making bracelets, wishing her husband safety. The brunette glanced at his wrist and asked in a strange, disappointed tone. Apparently, when the lady spoke of care, she meant exactly this. Blank, who had come up, grinned, noticing that the lord had expected something different and was even pleased. The blonde wanted to talk about passion, but the gentleman stepped on his foot in time, not allowing him to think about it. Of course, the bone was not broken, but next time, the knight should be more careful with his comments. Looking at his wife again, Alsford asked where her bracelet was. There should be a pair of each. The girl nodded. She didn't make one, because that would be considered strange. The beauty took the thing out of her pocket and held it out after the hero fastened the clasp. He noticed that the wrists were too thin. The blue-eyed one herself seemed frail from the first day. It was time to leave. The young man jumped on his horse and walked outside the castle, and at the end, the woman waved to him and asked him to be extremely careful. Silence fell in the courtyard. Nadia was happy that her husband had finally gotten rid of that villainous look. It made her feel better, but for some reason, her heart still felt empty. A strange feeling was clouding her, making her doubt. It had not been long since the lord had left the estate, when the knights began to group together for their mission. They began to explore the mountain range. This foreshadowed difficult consequences, but everyone also hoped for a favorable outcome. Despite all hopes, the mines were never discovered. The researchers were initially full of enthusiasm, but then began to tire as they progressed. They came to the lady every day to report that, again, there were no results. Blue-eyed thanked them for their efforts. They had to try even harder. Blank didn't believe that the woman didn't want to give up. If the information was still incorrect, there would be problems that had already begun to form. The knight left his face showing displeasure. The girl exhaled in disappointment. The subordinate showed increasing distrust. Of course, as time passed, and there were no obvious results, fatigue became an inevitable part of reality. The beauty would have given up long ago, but in the end, she won't do this for the simple reason that she has read the book more than 50 times, so she understands what the privilege of the heroes of a fantasy novel remained in her hands. However, the bright prospects were only momentary as time went by, and after several days, no news appeared. The woman also began to feel sad. She was afraid that suddenly, if they never found the mine, she would end up being expelled from Alsford. The girl went out for a walk. Anna forced her to relax and clear her head. Blank runs towards her. It turns out that after the ground subsided greatly, the knights explored the entire area and finally discovered those very magic stones. The beauty smiled joyfully when she learned that they really did now have a mine, as she believed everything turned out perfectly. The man told Pavel about the discovery because he was very excited. The lady was going to ask him to find a development specialist. The young man was going to show even more. It turned out that the volume of the magic stones was also not determined, and the weakness of the soil could complicate development. The blue-eyed girl resisted. She was still confident that she would definitely succeed. The novel never failed. She remembered this very well from the moment she read it. In the book, Altair was already introduced as a rich count, and this meant only one thing. In the area where the mine was discovered, there should be a significant amount of stones. Of course, development should be possible. All that remains is to wait until everyone is convinced of this, because this way the lady will not be able to tell the truth. Blank smiled. It was amazing to him how everything turned out this way. It seems that when the lady says something, everything immediately seems real. The girl nodded. Alsford will become much richer. Everyone will only be happy with this turn of events. The knights will no longer have to fight monsters to get some money. The woman wanted to hope that Altair would certainly be happy, although in her head, she only imagined that he would not be delighted and would still remain restrained in his emotions. The heroine, throwing aside her thoughts, said that first it was worth talking to Pavel, and then think further. The beauty didn't make any sudden movements, but she still realized that the bracelet had broken. Anna was worried and asked why this had happened. She remembered that the condition of the jewelry indicates the well-being of the partner. Because of this, it became scary to think about Altira and where he is now. Of course, everything the maid said was just superstition, but my lady was a little worried. The heroine reassured her assistant, stating that homemade gifts often tear and break. She does not believe in such things. She does not care at all what actually happened. An angry scream was heard, which made her distracted from her thoughts. Some man asks why they are talking to him like a stranger, and does not understand what is happening. He approached from behind, therefore he made the lady a little embarrassed. Blank stepped forward, leaving Nadia behind. The knight couldn't understand who dared to behave like that, considering that he had arrived as a guest in completely foreign territory. This made him feel disgusted. Another of the squad approached Wayne and asked for forgiveness. Of course, they should not have allowed such a mess right in front of my lady. They were unable to properly stop the aristocrat, who continued to shout. The man explained that he was Count Gallard, which bordered the lands of Alsford. If he really was, then he was a fairly high-ranking person. It would be difficult to stop such an assertive guy. It turned out that an acquaintance was going to talk to the lady baroness. The blue-eyed woman took the situation into her own hands. At the moment, she is the only one who can resolve the situation her husband has left, and it is unclear when he will return. The brunette hears how he is asked to leave, because the lord of the estate is absent, but he becomes even more aggressive if there is no lord. At least Nadia should be able to receive guests. She did not get married for nothing, and should understand her responsibilities. The woman stepped forward and addressed Gallard. If there were any direct questions she asked, that he address them only to her. There was no point in delaying, as that would not be right. Nadia introduced herself with her full name, to make it clear who was in front of him. The old man continued the same squabble. The lady decided only then to follow the rules. The education and manners of her subordinates leave much to be desired. The girl nodded. She needed to find out what business the Count had contacted Alsford about, because he was not saying anything. He was simply indignant. Turning around, the lady pointed to the soldiers. There was such a huge number standing near the gate that it became obvious that this was a very important matter. The Count learned that knights came from the estate, that they illegally invaded his territory and caused chaos. They were where they should not have been. This is what we are talking about. Even the lady began to worry. It was impossible to draw a logical chain, because the mine was located on the territory of Alsford. Blank intervened, who tried to explain everything. The brunette did not believe it. He says that such a thing never happened. That place belongs to Gallard. The man pulled out a map with 2 cities marked on it. The knight looked at it carefully. It was an old version of the drawing. About 5 years ago, part of the mountain range was given to the duchy as compensation for the extermination of monsters, and they suffered great losses back then. The old man is lying. He realized that he needed to back down in time. Now he thought about it and decided that handing over the land simply for destruction was too generous. He promises to pay a fee, but it would be better to return the land back to his possessions. Blank is even more indignant. Now he can't stand it anymore. When it was time to give away the unwanted hundreds, of course the man did just that. But when circumstances changed, and he wants to pay, he just thinks it's better to stick to the agreement that was made back then. Blue-eyed began to build a logical chain. She now understood that the lands where the mine was discovered had once been handed over in lieu of money. The woman did not understand what the point of complaining was, if Gallard himself had given it away in lieu of legal payment, believing that it would be cheaper for him that way. While the girl was thinking, the old man got completely tired of arguing, declaring that it was probably useless to do this. The man approached the baroness and ordered her to sign the papers since the lord was absent. He did not intend to wait, because he wanted to get his back as soon as possible. Looking away, the beauty quietly asked why she was chosen to do this. It was written on paper, so there was no reason to refuse. The Duke promised to pay generously for the poor plot of land he had once cleared. To calm down and weigh everything, Nadia took a pause. Perhaps in the capital, a neighbor's glance might make her hesitate, but compared to Altair, this is literally nothing. The lady comes forward declaring that it is for her own reasons that she refuses payment. There are no idlers in Alsford, but people who understand what they are doing. The gentleman would hardly have signed a strange agreement, and he understands this better. The baroness orders him to get out and not show up again. The girl turned out to be too nasty. This infuriated the count. He became so loud that it almost blocked his ears. The barony will not resist his orders. The brunette grabbed the lady by the hand against her will, intending to sign for her. The heroine's assistants wanted to rush to get rid of the annoying man, but someone got ahead of them. A rough voice asked what was going on and grabbed the enemy by the arm. Turning around, the girl happily realized that standing in front of her was none other than her husband. The young man returned safe and sound. The heroine was worried about the man because the bracelet had broken, but now she can breathe a sigh of relief. Gallard jumped aside. He realized that the baron had returned, and he realized that now it would not be so easy to sign the papers. He expected the young man to return much later, but for some reason he did so earlier, and without warning, the brunette began to put pressure on him morally. The count had no right to come to someone else's house and cause disorder during the absence of the one in charge of the estate. The man is shouting about some kind of misunderstanding, but Altair still wants to know the reason for the visit. He needs to know why his neighbor is treating Nadia so badly, taking advantage of his enemy's absence. The count feels so helpless that he turns back to one of the knights, quietly asking why he lied to him, saying that the lord would not return. Even if he did not return, why did Gallard think that he could take over the mine? Altair is healthy as an ox. His health is fine even after the battle with the dragon. The girl finally realized what was happening, and that they were brazenly trying to rob her. The brunette takes out his sword and turns to Pavel. He probably remembers that bringing troops into another person's territory without consent is tantamount to war. The assistant nodded. A dangerous fire flashed in the chief's eyes. Anger was pouring out over the edge. Killing the intruder would be considered self-defense. The count fell to his knees and began to ask for forgiveness. He did not mean to behave incorrectly. The tone of the protagonist's voice did not change. Apologies should be expressed not to him, but to his wife. The count quickly blurted out that he was sorry and ran away like a true coward, taking a squad of knights with him. The brunette grinned. It was funny to watch his pathetic neighbor. The woman quietly asked if everything would be all right, since there was a person of higher status in front of them, and the fact that he was now offended would not be so easy to let go. Anyone who doesn't know how to defend themselves will eventually understand that they will have to lose. The problem is that the guard dogs didn't handle the situation well. They will probably also have to be given a separate punishment for the behavior they had. The beauty froze. She didn't think that everything would come to this point. The people who should receive condemnation from Altair are not knights like the lord's wife. The girl was obliged to properly protect their home, while her husband was absent on his mission, which was important to him. Unfortunately, Nadia couldn't even push the hand away. When they grabbed her, she sincerely asks for forgiveness, and when the young man doesn't understand why, he starts explaining that she was near the estate but didn't complete the task properly. The master must be disappointed, because my lady is not worthy of the position she occupies. The young man carefully took the woman's hand to check. It seemed she had a bruise left, and he should probably apply some ointment to relieve the pain a little. The heroine explains that since she was simply grabbed hard, it's not so important that it's worth wasting resources and time. As always, the lady is too weak, yet the mark remains and makes itself felt. The man is not the least bit angry, and this is strange. Everything needs to be checked as soon as possible. The beauty lowered her eyes and accidentally noticed a huge bloodstain that spread across her dark clothes. The young man smiled, assuring her that he was fine. He was slightly injured during the massacre that took place in the mountains. The blue-eyed girl stuttered. From what she saw, there was too much blood to call it a minor injury. A doctor should definitely be called as soon as possible. The man refuses to the last and asks not to make unnecessary noise. The beauty is still terrified and therefore raises her voice loudly. The parents who were in an accident passed away due to blood loss. The day is remembered as if it happened yesterday. Her body is shaking. It's harder to control herself. Nadia doesn't understand what she'll do if something happens to her husband. It will be the end. The brunette asks what happened, but the girl doesn't give a precise answer. Just with fear in her eyes, asks to go to the doctor. After exhaling, her husband finally agrees. He will take the treatment so that everything will be fine. The heroine has to repeat to herself, in order to become completely calm, that Altair will cope in any case. He is a strong man who is not afraid of anything. It is strange that then the fact that the man is the most powerful villain in the universe became the greatest consolation. As soon as the young man landed on the bed, the doctor lifted his clothes and froze. There were cuts all over his torso. One of them was the most serious. First, he was going to put in stitches and then prescribe a painkiller, which should also be effective enough. The woman didn't expect the wound to be so deep, although the amount of blood should have indicated it. The scars left from old wounds also proved that the gentleman had encountered similar situations quite often and therefore didn't react so violently. The girl asked if the hero was in a lot of pain. Maybe she could take his hand to ease the suffering a little. When Nadia was very little, her mother always took her hand and supported her in this way. She always felt much better. The blue-eyed girl was about to apologize as this method was childish, but then her husband declared that it really hurt him. Without thinking twice, he extended his hand to be held so it would hurt less. The girl carefully moved closer, and she blushed. This time, everything was different from how it was in childhood. For some reason, the lady's heart was beating, as if it would fly out of her chest. In this situation, the doctor could not complete the treatment of the couple. He himself thought that he had gotten into an awkward situation. In the end, Nadia couldn't figure out why her heart was pounding so much, so she had to leave everything as it was. That day, the treatment was still successful. The doctor gave 3 important instructions and quickly left, or rather, ran away. Firstly, Altair was forbidden from overexerting himself with excessive movements. Secondly, he was always required to take painkillers when in pain. And thirdly, he was required to change his position at least once every half hour. For strict recovery, it was forbidden to violate even one of the rules. The woman decided to take care of her husband while he was sick. She thought that this was the essence of being a wife after the man returned. The girl began to guard him day and night, not leaving him for a second. She bandaged the wounds and gave medicine, trying to be careful so as not to worsen the wounds. For many days, the main character prayed, hoping that everything would be fine. She did not want Alsford to get new scars. He already had enough pain, which completely took over his entire body and beyond. Pavel came into the room to talk. He needed to find the Lord and sign a bunch of important documents that couldn't wait any longer. The Lord hissed. His wife fell asleep on the bed, and he gently stroked her head. Fatigue simply made the situation worse. The blonde apologized. Perhaps he should have waited a little and come back a little later. The brunette asked not to open the door so loudly anymore, because the room no longer belonged only to him. The lady was very tired, so she probably didn't wake up. She had been stubbornly completing all her tasks for several days. There's nothing surprising about it knowing what Nadia's like, and it's certainly not surprising that she's so worried. It's a pointless procedure. Usually in a situation like this, my lord would have been at training long ago, taking care of all his other chores, but still being by his wife's side. This time, the woman simply wanted to rest, and the man also understood that fighting a dragon was a tiring task, even for a country like Alsford. Pavel asked to move on to discussing the documents. The issue of Count Gallard's protest regarding the development of the mine was the most important document that the assistant had brought. The brunette only got angry when he saw the last name, but when he started reading, his eyes almost popped out of his head. The Count was demanding compensation for insulting him. This was a stupid thing to do, but since the old man had great influence in the East, ignoring him would definitely not work. Now, in the letter, the old man speaks with great confidence. Although before he was almost trembling, even if he is a coward, he still retains a status that has its own power now in the castle. There are duties that must be observed, so it is better to be careful not to create problems for yourself. The young man exhaled. The butler was as usual, right before the man could act without fear of losing something. This gave him the opportunity to rise above those who were supposed to protect him. Fortunately, or unfortunately, Altair had someone he wanted to protect. His gaze rests on the girl, who is peacefully snoring, being nearby. At first, she was delighted that she would take care of him, but then she got tired and fell asleep. Now, her behavior is very sweet. It makes him smile again and again. When the young man said that he was taking a wife for the sake of the heir, he thought that being an aristocrat of the capital, this was just a formal marriage. They would not even intersect when the girl came as a bride to foreign lands. She turned out to be too different from what the hero had imagined. The brunette smooths Nadia's hair. He still doesn't understand how to behave with someone who is so important to him. She is fragile. A cough was heard, thus Pavel reminded that he is still in the room. He needs to know how the issue with Count Gallard will be resolved. The young man immediately assumed a defensive posture, claiming he remembered everything, although in fact he had gotten distracted and forgotten. In any case, he had a plan. First he asked for a good remedy for bruises. The assistant frowned. It would be impossible to deal with the Count in the way the man usually did. The brunette lowered his voice and pointed at his wife. She still had a problem. Her wrist was still red and swollen. It was time for Gallard to see who was in charge of the lands. I hope that after skillful elections, he would no longer dare to engage in such nonsense. In the morning, when the lady went back to her document, her assistant came to see her. He had managed to study everything, including the location and scale of the mine. If he was so ready, it seemed better to begin development as soon as possible, so as not to drag it out until the last minute. The woman hears them give her consent. She is not stupid after all, so she finishes her thought. The whole problem is in the funds. A huge amount of funds is required to develop the mine. After all, everything is not so simple, considering the magical stones inside. The blonde man explained it as it was, and the lady, as usual, was right. At that point, the financial resources were insufficient to immediately begin development. The man consulted with the gentleman, and they were considering taking out a loan from an Imperial bank or attracting investment from wealthy individuals. The woman chuckled. The situation isn't clear. They need to think about it some more. External sources of financing imply high interest payments or a share of the profits. This isn't the path to the absolute success that awaits them. Blue Eyes asks to be allowed to use the dowry she brought with her. Although it is not as much as she would like, there is still money, and she is confident that it will be enough to cover the initial costs of development. The young man perked up as soon as he heard the words about the transfer of funds that had been discussed earlier. They shouldn't have discussed it. It was Pavel's mistake. There were still other options, and Alsford couldn't find out about what had happened under any circumstances. Otherwise, he might get really angry. The beauty sadly lowered her head. She does not understand when everything turned down a crooked path. For some reason, it seemed that her husband would be happy. The heroine exhaled. She has another more favorable idea. Money can always be invested, thus playing out the situation. Investments are still necessary in the end. Nadia wants to invest in development, realizing that this way she will be able to achieve good results. Pavel didn't know what to answer. Everything happened too quickly. The woman tossed and turned, jumping up. She realized that she was still sleeping in bed, and it was already night outside. She did not understand when it happened. First, there was a conversation in the office about the development of the mine. Then the lady rested a little, taking care of Altair, and after that, she found herself in bed, although there was no one nearby. The question of where the young man had gone arose in his head. There was a knock at the door. The man returned faster than expected. His voice was calm, and if the woman had woken up, it didn't mean she had had enough rest. He thought it was better to take some more time to get a little more sleep. Blue-eyed refused. She didn't need it. She was surprised that her husband could walk. Wounds should hurt, but something had changed. The doctor said that there might be a fever. Then it would be worth giving an antipyretic. This way, the body will recover faster. Everything is fine, according to Alsford. He doesn't even need any bandages, thanks to Aura's influence. The hero recovers faster than other people, so there is nothing to worry about. Again, the wound was bleeding before, but now everything is fine. Anna and the rest of the close assistants took the gentleman's wound calmly, because it was not the first time he had received something like this. The young man brought a box with him, inside of which there was a healing ointment. Most likely, the hero was going to apply the composition himself. The beauty backed away. She promised that she could do everything that was required of her herself. It would be inconvenient for the young man to apply it himself, but if he took off his outerwear and lay down, his wife would do everything for him. Almost everything had healed, but caring for wounds is the wife's responsibility. They must try to avoid any new scars. The maiden began to do what she had promised. There was nothing strange about it, but for some reason, her heart began to beat much faster again. The young man abruptly pushed the beauty's hand away and asked her to stop. It seemed to him that there was already enough ointment, perhaps even too much. Nadia suggested that more should be applied, but she was stopped again this time, more insistently. It was the lady's turn to understand the treatment. She didn't understand what it was all about, because she felt great. It turned out there was still a mark on her wrist, which meant it needed to be removed. The brunette asked for help. This time, he would try to do everything in his power. The man carefully does his job. The woman sits, clenching her teeth. It doesn't hurt her, but the place itches very badly, making her want to scream. At some point, the husband was very close. If you touch him, nothing will happen. Time passed, and finally, Altair doesn't seem such a terrible person to my lady. The blue-eyed woman quietly called the gentleman to bring him to consciousness. The young man did not like the way he was addressed. Everyone calls him that, but his wife is a different story. Usually spouses have their own ideas about what is right. The girl always thought that a normal address would not be a problem, but since everything turned out this way, she has no choice. If Alsford has any wishes, she will call him exactly that. Before the young man left to fight the dragon, the lady promised that she would decide how she would address her husband. Unfortunately, even after hours of deliberation, nothing changed significantly. It wasn't even mentioned in the handbook on aristocratic affairs. The brunette pressed, making it clear that it was not difficult. Perhaps the answer was as simple as memories of parents. The girl recalls how people from her family behaved. For some reason, it was not the best example. The lady's parents always addressed each other with respect, and in the capital, this was the ideal marital relationship. The girl arrived in a completely different place, so she could not say for sure whether it was customary to behave differently in the eastern region. Suddenly, another thought came to mind. When the couple were in a private room, they had other options. The beauty does not know whether Altair will like this. He pulled her out of her thoughts. Noticing that the beauty was again thinking about something strange, she tried to explain. Thoughts about his parents came to him by chance, only after the words he said to her. The young man assured her that no matter what his wife thought, he would always be for it. It was normal for a couple to be close, because the hero really wanted everything to be right. Alsford didn't understand why the girl had such a violent reaction. Just because of one address, the girl started listing ridiculous names, like my bee. Her husband's face turned red, either from embarrassment or from anger. With a slight grin, the protagonist asked if it was true that Nadia's parents had called each other, that she nodded enthusiastically. In private, only cute nicknames were used, which was convenient. The man was thinking about something else, since his family always addressed each other by their first names. Nadia didn't know if this was normal. She was afraid to easily pronounce the name of the villain from the novel. With a clear conscience, the girl was afraid to even imagine the brunette asking her to leave the option he chose, because even this was better than cupcakes and bees. The beauty agreed, but something unexpected happened to her. The woman understood that she had no choice, so she collected her thoughts and finally did what she had planned, still unable to find the strength not to add, "Sir." The young man asked if the girl allowed him to call her by her name. Nadia smiled involuntarily. She did not expect that they would come to this, given the fact that in front of her was that very villain. The woman said that everything was fine. They would try again and again, until they felt completely comfortable. The man said the name so calmly and softly that it became more pleasant. Now the little girl was convinced that something really was wrong with her, because her heart began to flutter again. The hero reminded him that he had once been promised to try hard. The lady promised that she was sure that she could handle any task. The woman skillfully answered questions. Alsford took her by the shoulders and laid her down next to him on the bed. Their faces were very close. Noticing the fear, he reassured her that she was not going to do anything, that in the evening they would simply share warmth with each other. The hero was so tired from all the work that he didn't want to do anything else. After 10 minutes, he fell asleep, hugging Nadia. The beauty began to understand that every time she fell asleep, she smelled Altair. He was always there, helping her not to be alone. Some time passed. Alsford cleared the goblin-infested areas around the marble quarries, and the long-planned development began word spread, and people from all over flocked to the estate to find out more details or to grab a piece for themselves. Most of the visitors were traders who wanted to win trade with the marble quarry, but thanks to them, the estate became much more lively than before, even began to resemble a capital or a more populous estate. Serving a huge number of people, it became clear that one of the castle's most terrible problems was that they didn't have enough workers. 3 workers was too few. The girl began to come up with a plan. To begin with, she decided to hire more assistants and then begin the restoration of the castle. There should be more money. The volume of magical stones in Alsford, excavated as a result of mining, was truly enormous. Its reserves seemed to promise to last for millennia. The purity was also different. It was higher than that of ordinary stones the jewelry will sell for a very high price. The woman was seriously considering putting some effort into the work as well. While Altair was looking for buyers, His wife was responsible for the salaries of the new employees at the castle. Pavel brought a whole stack of resumes from applicants for servant positions. The number of candidates is definitely large, perhaps due to the slightly higher salary. The blonde had already looked through some of the sheets and found out that there were many candidates with impressive work experience, especially in the case of one girl. It turned out that we were talking about a certain Mary. She had been Nadia's servant since the time when she was still the only beloved daughter of the Marquise. The girl remembers everything that happened between them then. The woman always valued her, even when the beauty turned from a girl into a naughty young woman overnight. Then the brunette agreed to follow her. If the lady wanted to leave her uncle, the old man forbade taking anything from the estate. It was surprising that Nadia would see her again. Pavel put Mary's resume aside because he felt like it could be fate. The girl smiled and explained the history that connected the two of them. Only the assistant did not turn to Milady with reproaches, because now she wants to meet again. Since the lady made a decision, the young man agreed to immediately formalize the contract. Altair entered the room, wanting to know why his wife was so happy. Lately, whenever the heroine sees her husband, her heart begins to beat faster. The butler noticed the tension. If the two wanted to talk alone, he would not mind leaving, not allowing the lady to object. He quickly ran into the corridor. When the couple is alone, Nadia gets even more tense. Pavel behaved very cruelly. It was wrong on his part. The woman was asked about the conversation. As it turned out, she wanted to ask about a meeting of Eastern noble families soon. And besides that, she needed to pick out clothes and make repairs to the castle. She needed permission before spending money. Altair raised an eyebrow. Managing the castle was the baroness's responsibility, and she didn't need to get approval on every issue. The young man noted that he would no longer have to worry about money. The blue-eyed girl did not believe it at first, but it seemed that a deal had been made with the supreme powers. The brunette nodded. He had entered into an exclusive agreement for the supply of magic stones with the Silver Fox. They offered 5 billion gold as a deposit for the rights. Alsford's 10-year budget would normally be less than this, which is fantastic news, as it's a huge area for the Silver Fox. In the Empire, control over the districts is divided between the Black Panther and the Silver Fox. Recently, they have been competing for a monopoly on the amethyst mines of Alsford. The Foxes striving to take the leading position. Their desperation was visible on their faces. The profit-sharing agreement, 8-2 in favor of Alsford, is a truly lucrative one. The girl smiles. This is truly wonderful news. Blue Eyes has always wanted the residents to live better, and this will be a reality. She cannot help but rejoice at their future well-being. There was silence until the young man patted the girl on the head. It all happened thanks to her, although he still didn't understand how all the thoughts fit into her small head. Brunette truly expresses gratitude as if he were the most important person in the land. He doesn't know what they would do without such help. The heroine cannot believe what she sees. Altair smiled and thanked her, although in the novel, the man is a cruel villain who carelessly takes people's lives. The person Nadia met in person was very different from the image described on the pages of the book. It was like a completely different person. The man decided to change the subject and asked when the lady was going to pick out clothes for herself. It would also take time to make them, and she should even take that into account. Of course, Altair promised that he would tell Pavel that the tailor should arrive as soon as possible. The hero looks at his wife strangely, as if he needs something else. Perhaps it is because of his mood, but it seems that he is very close. The Count's voice is heard. He is standing under the window and begging the Lord to meet him. The brunette would not like to go, but since he is asked as a good man, he will respond. The man jumps in front of the knights, not understanding why they won't let him in. Finally, the gentleman comes out with Nadia next to him, looking a little scared. The young man plays a game of sarcasm, pleased to see before him a man who has somehow found his way into the modest territory of another leader. The old man asks who could call Alsford, that the brunette smiles. It seems the neighbor has forgotten that he expressed himself exactly like that both recently and even 5 years ago. The hero was frightened by the look. If the master had any grievances, he was ready to apologize. He was stupid and begged for help to come with Gallard. The griffin could destroy the garden, and all the agricultural crops of the year would go to waste. If the monster is not stopped in time, it will not be possible to collect the fruit in time for delivery to the royal palace. Grapes were the Count's main source of income. The griffin, which suppresses everything around him, is a very difficult opponent. Everything is hopeless if anyone other than Altair takes on the job. The Count's situation is difficult, but after the battle with the dragon, The young man returned with wounds. The gentleman suggests hiring other mercenaries for the job. The brunette searched, but found no one with sufficient combat skills. He doesn't understand what to do next. Hoping only for the Baron, and that he would accept the task, Altair turned to Nadia. He would do as she said, and would not mind if she told him what would be best. The old man fell on his knees and asked for forgiveness for all his bad deeds. Even such a powerful man as he bows, and people pay attention to this. Those who were in the courtyard travel throughout the empire as traitors, and rumors of what happened will spread quickly. The protagonist chuckled. Since Gallard apologized so much, there was nothing else to do but agree the city had to accept the request for extermination for the sake of dignity. The wife would probably also give her consent. The guy began to nod actively. The payment would also be generous. He began to believe that he would not be left in trouble after all. The gentleman promises that he will take advantage of his promise and undertake the work that no one else can do. As payment, he will have to hand over part of the garden. Altair is truly amazing, because in the end, he got his way. He was told that the method of transferring property was a good option. 20% was considered a suitable price. The young man thought it was too much, so it seems that in the end, everyone came to an agreement to get 10% Pavel, and the gentleman seemed to know about everything in advance. Most likely, this was the idea of the main character. The Count suffered a defeat, but probably because of the problem with the eclipse, he will not become an enemy of Alsford. In the novel, the man is refined, and this revenge is truly impressive. The brunette asked the girl if she liked any other method. The hero cannot simply accept it when he and his loved ones are adored. If Nadia is disappointed, then there is nothing he can do. He cannot allow people to wait. The woman insists that she is fine. She explained that it was actually refreshing to see her husband take revenge on the Count, who ruined his life. In a quiet voice, the beauty asks if the young man is disappointed in her behavior. Perhaps she is not as noble as he had built up in his expectations. The guy smiled, assuring her that it was nonsense. The blue-eyed girl froze. Of course, it was a bit of an awkward smile, but it seemed to be not bad. On the contrary, it was pleasant. Soon after the incident, the girl received a share of Gallard's garden. New guests arrived at the estate, and they had an appointment for which they were grateful. The beautiful woman introduced herself as a designer who had brought with her the most fashionable designs and fabrics from the capital. She hoped that everything would be to her taste. The heroine examined the samples. Almost all of them were female, although she had initially planned to choose something worthwhile for Altair. The brunette was also surprised. He asked to bring her not only clothes for riding at the meeting, but also everyday clothes. Alsford prepared everything for his wife. Due to limited time, the girl did not have time to bring many samples, but she prepared a variety to sew for the future. The beauty handed over the catalog and asked her to choose. Turning to Nadia, Alsford asked her to go through and choose what she liked the most. Perhaps she had no ideas, but everything would appear. The blue-eyed woman looked down sadly. She wanted something else. She called a tailor to make suits not for herself, but for Altair. The brunette frowned. He didn't need any special outfits. What he already had was enough. The beauty explained that they couldn't look careless at the meeting. In her husband's opinion, few could fail to notice him. To be strict, the girl also doesn't see the point in buying herself new outfits. The designer standing behind her began to suggest that coming to the estate wasn't the best idea. The brunette did not agree to stand aside. She handed over a piece of paper and asked to first choose a dress for the lady, and when the time came, she could choose something for the gentleman as well. The woman couldn't respond to this, and since there were no objections from Nadia, it was time to begin trying on the clothes and taking measurements. While the measurements were being taken, the designer constantly complimented the lady. It was time for the first outfit. The dark-colored skirt was slightly flared to emphasize her thin waist. The woman looked at herself in surprise. She had never worn such bright clothes, even as a child, so she didn't know if they suited her. She wanted another person's opinion. The man standing to the side nodded. He seemed to like it, but he would have liked to see other options too. Graceful shoulders, or a delicate outfit. Everything was beautiful. After it was all over, the heroine fell onto the sofa. Not understanding how she got so tired, something incredible happened. They ordered 13 outfits. Even when the girl's parents were alive, she never had so many clothes. Alsford asked what happened. Perhaps there was something that his wife wanted to tell him, but simply did not have time. The blue-eyed girl doesn't want to call the tailor again. On the contrary, she thinks that she had too much choice, and there was no need to waste money on a lot of clothes. Luxury is a term used to describe the pleasure a person gets from spending money that they simply cannot afford. Nadia gave the country the opportunity to have a good supply so it can enjoy it to the fullest. Obviously, the young man had such thoughts, especially since in the capital, they could live even more luxuriously. Because of the circumstances in Alsford, things weren't going well. But that's not the case anymore. Altair is right, but he still doesn't know that his wife was an outcast in the Wayne family. Everyone lived a luxurious life, but not her. The young man could not afford to spend much on a dowry, but now that circumstances had changed, it was necessary to take good care of the county which needed it. The blue-eyed woman asked again, in aristocratic society, there is a tradition, when the groom sends money to the bride, that's what it's called. When the lady lived in the estate, the uncle was very angry, that despite the fact that the baron was a beggar, he did not give a single penny. Melissa noted that it was true that his reputation did not develop without reason. The blonde man realized that even at the wedding, there would be no help. He didn't like his future son-in-law's attitude, so until the last day, all he could hear was indignation. Now it seems that the man sent a dowry, in fact even receiving a share in the garden, was connected with the thought of tribute. This is a good option that I wanted to use. The woman screams that her uncle probably won't want this, but she is assured that everything is fine. In any case, she will never have to worry again. The man has doubts in his heart. The heroine sadly lowered her head. The mood seems strange. No lady would refuse an offer of a monetary contribution to her home. Clutching the hem of her dress with her hands, the beauty tries to think of an option that will help sort everything out as quickly as possible. The girl cannot hand over the property, dear to Alsford, to Wayne. In the morning, Mary arrived at the estate. She was glad to see the gentleman. Since childhood, she admired Lady Nadia, who became a baroness, earning recognition. The brunette asked if the maid knew everything about the affairs of the marquise and the marquise. He had a topic he would like to discuss, unlike the rumors about the young man's youth. Although he is handsome, he still resembles an aggressive beast. The protagonist wants his questions to be answered honestly. He first wanted to know if Wayne really loved his niece, as he told everyone. The lady did not understand why the question was so abrupt and froze. Of course, the marquise had many terrible deeds towards the gentleman that she would like to tell about, but it was not clear whether the baron could be trusted. If it became known that the uncle had done something terrible to the girl, the baroness's position in Alsford could be shaken. The woman cares about the position of the maiden, one must be more careful. Even Altair noticed that Mary was more thoughtful than she should be. He couldn't help, but she was a great benefactor. The hero was going to offer her the position of personal servant. The beauty was surprised, because she was still too young and inexperienced for all this. The duties could have been entrusted to someone better, but the baroness was too soft to control such a person. The best candidate already exists, as such a person is more easily managed. Nadia needs help with her chores, but don't overdo it. The brunette will try to do everything possible. The woman asked for something else. If the gentleman has any intention of devoting his time to the lady, then she would like to ask that you consider conducting an investigation regarding the ring called Cassandra's Smile. Anna called the lady. She was in a hurry, but careful not to fall. Her husband had prepared some kind of gift, but it was not clear what kind. Judging by what was in the garden, it should have been flowers. The girl came and froze in front of her. Is Mary, who is glad to see and greet my lady again. It seems as if they are in some kind of dream that will soon end. Blue-eyed asked how the maid ended up on the eastern border in this city. She was called earlier to help. This is really the best gift. The brunette arrived and immediately noticed how the gentleman was worried about his wife. He insistently asked her to take good care of the girl. The heroine herself noticed that recently, the young man truly respects her as his wife. At first, the girl was afraid of him, but now being near him, she feels calm. The blue-eyed woman explained that the man treated her well. He had recently bought her a lot of new dresses and praised her for her efforts, which was truly nice considering the circumstances. The man gave the girl the opportunity to manage the castle, and he also makes sure that she eats well. As Mary listened, she understood that this was not like a relationship between spouses, but like raising children. The woman decided to ask if there was anything between the lovers. But when the beauty says something, it seems that there is no talk of marriage at all. The heroine wanted to ask not to talk about it, but even Anna asked to continue. For a happy life, the relationship between spouses is very important, especially since it is necessary to continue the family line. Shameful memories came to mind when When the lady said that she knew more than the master expected of her, she was then sure that she would do everything that was asked of her. It turned out that the conversations with Altair had a hidden meaning all the time. Mary noticed that the reaction was strange. Her face turned completely red. The maid wanted to know how the couple's first night went. The girl explained that she fainted, so nothing happened. The following nights were without intimacy. Mary felt like she was about to cry, because all this seemed unreal to her. All this time the beauty had done nothing and had not seen the problem. Even if the heroine was not the one who was able to understand what kind of relationship a spouse should have, there was still no man who would sleep peacefully next to such a wonderful bride. Some measures had to be taken. That was the decision. The maids were not sure if it was the right thing to do, but they still wanted to try to do something. Blue-eyed didn't know if Mary could be trusted, but she still agreed. In the evening, they dressed her in pajamas, which were considered the most ordinary, but in fact were very revealing. The girl didn't understand how she could sleep in an airy style. The brunette smiled. There wouldn't be any problems in the end. She would have to take the thing off anyway, so there wouldn't be time to wait. The woman tries to convince the mistress that spending the night with her husband is not at all scary. It should be taken for granted. If the problem is with the air, the lady wants to do everything possible to help. When the heroine was led into the room, she froze because she realized that the maids had perhaps tried too hard. Mary and Anna's work was done. There is no need to embellish because the two are already spouses. The friend prepared a special dinner for the gentleman, so he probably found out about everything in advance. When the young man was served food in the evening, he did not understand what it all meant. It turned out that the lady had specially sent the best, and they had prepared only men's food for him. The cook's eyes sparkled strangely, as if something was about to happen very soon. Perhaps the hero looked tired because the beauty had prepared everything for him. Such care was alien to him because the last time she was present was in his childhood. The girl sits alone in the room and worries. Despite the fact that she is expecting Altair, still hasn't come lately. He seems very busy, but she is afraid to fall asleep. Finally, the door opened. As soon as the hero entered, he said that he had finished eating. The dinner was excellent. The young man froze when he saw his wife in such a wonderful guise. It is hard to believe that the man did not know if he had been aware. As Mary said, he would not have been so embarrassed. The girl is ashamed the dinner was specifically for the purpose of noticing. The heroine finally expresses her true thought. She understood what the young man wanted from her as a wife. Altair married only with the goal of getting an heir, so now everything will happen. Of course the woman was right, because she guessed correctly. A situation arose when an heir was urgently needed, and the hero was forced to marry. Regardless of the circumstances, he moved in accordance with his goal. The hero placed his palms on the beauty's cheeks. If she did the same, he would fulfill her every wish. He didn't think he would have to press hard at all. There is no need to do anything that the lady does not want, just to fulfill her duty. The girl asks to wait a little. She needs to explain. It seemed to Alsford that his wife was not ready yet, but others were pushing her. A woman answers, as she thinks she made her own judgment in accordance with her desire. Now she thinks that the man is good and is ready to be with him. The beauty truly wants to be with Altair as a husband and bear a child. She is kissed sharply, removing all doubts, and asked for the last time if the situation is really clear. If the lady hadn't known, wouldn't have put on revealing clothes, and wouldn't have waited, the girl decided to offer a secret code. When she said it, it would mean that it had become really scary. The young man nodded. He realized that it would be easier to agree, and then he threw the girl onto the bed. She looked at him with a surprised look, although she still thought that everything would be fine. The lady was not afraid at all. Everything changed. When the morning came, she realized that her whole body was in incredible pain. This suffering was inexplicable. Noticing Altair in front of her, the lady jumped up. She didn't know that he was next to her. He is not such an irresponsible husband as to leave his wife alone after the first night together. The beauty said that she felt fine, but her body ached a little. The doctor could not do anything about it, and they also had an appointment with a tailor that afternoon. The brunette still thought that no matter what he wore, everything would be fine. He would never get used to good clothes. The girl looked sadly into his eyes. One cannot refuse something good just because one is not in the habit of wearing decent things. A young man must value himself. A girl also wants to have a little fun, and the fun lies in dressing up her loved one in stylish outfits that suit him. Blank was in the gentleman's office and noticed how his hand trembled. The man seemed lost in his thoughts, and everyone knows what happened there. The brunette asked what happened to the lady, but he just waved her off to change the subject. He began to attack the hero, asking whether he came for work or if he had nothing to do. The young man also does not want to work, so he replies that he found the owner of the ring mentioned earlier. His name is Viscount Basmonti. He is an aristocrat who owns vast lands. The jewelry was put up for auction by a well-known auctioneer in the capital, who bought the items from a young artist known as Dillion. The baron nodded, but still did not understand how such a man came to be the owner of a valuable pink diamond ring. The item was given to him by the marquis's niece. The reason for the transfer could not be determined. The artist assumed that if he revealed this information, trouble would await him, so they decided to remain silent. To begin with, the hero asked to buy the ring, paying a good price. Perhaps he would have to instill a little fear in them, so that they wouldn't ask for an absurd amount. That same morning, all the ordered dresses arrived at the estate. The maids had never seen anything so luxurious before. The only thing missing was some jewelry to complete the look. Blue-Eyed noted that buying everything at once would be a huge expense, but you can prepare gradually so as not to take up too much of your budget. Typically, noble ladies use jewelry passed down from generation to generation, simply changing its design in accordance with fashion. Unfortunately, the heroine could not do the same. She even sold the valuable inherited jewelry given to her by her mother. She was in need and had no choice. Mary asked to try on beautiful outfits, and not to be sad, it would help lift her spirits. There were no plans for the day, but something could always be thought of, like a walk with the Lord. Shortly before Anna left, Altair arrived. The young man did not understand what was being discussed. When asked about the news, his wife explained that she wanted to send a maid to ask him to go with her to the gardens. It would be difficult to go out in such an outfit, similar to pajamas. The blue-eyed girl looked worriedly at her assistant, promising that she would prepare some kind of dress. Mary was blown away. As if by the wind, she knew which option she had to choose. The girl did not understand why her husband came lately. He had been so busy that he could not even spare an hour for a walk. As it turns out, the man has questions he'd like to ask, and leaving them unanswered wouldn't be in his nature. He could find the answers by studying the past, but he wants to hear them from Nadia's lips. Altair asked about an artist named Dillion. He held out a ring, which the lady also knew about. Fear was reflected in his eyes. It was obvious that everything did not go according to plan. The woman asked where the jewelry came from. Of course, it was acquired legally. Upon examining the history, many interesting details emerged. Dillion promised to keep the secret, but he let it slip. Altair still wanted to know why the girl handed over the jewel that her family needed so much. For some reason, Alsford assumed the worst, that man was probably his wife's lover. She screams that this is not so. She had her own reasons. From the young man's side, everything was logical. The girl sighed sadly, and a menacing voice, which had not been heard for a long time, declared that in front of the spear, the young man's lips were not so closed. The girl tried to calm herself down and force herself not to be afraid. The villain standing in front of her was not the one from the pages of the novel. He would understand everything if he knew the truth and the details. The woman explained that Dillion was a good man who helped her when she was going through hard times, and that he didn't receive the ring but simply helped her sell it. The beauty realized that now she would be asked that very question. She was ready. Money was urgently needed for the funeral of her parents and for their burial place. Altair was more surprised than expected. The funeral of the baron's family, to which they belonged, was supposed to be paid for by the new title holder. They were supposed to have a family crypt on the lands. The woman also thought that everything would be simpler, but no one asked her. The uncle understood that it was better not to say such things, but he stated that the girl's parents did not have the right to be buried in the family crypt. At first, the girl didn't understand what was going on, but they explained to her with anger in their eyes that the couple had caused great harm to the family. The father had spent a lot of money, having fallen under the stupid influence of scammers. The little girl thought that this was impossible. If she had been smarter, she would have checked everything. The baron said that since his niece wanted to arrange a funeral, she would have to pay for using the cemetery. The girl recounted the situation to her husband. She now understands that her parents would never have lost the money or ruined anything. The situation was such that her uncle had complete control over the family. There was no choice. The woman wanted to resist, but when she came to her senses, the servants in the estate, even the outer nobles, all were on the side of the cunning baron. Everyone hated Nadia. Blue Eyes knew that if it became known that she had sold precious metals before the wedding, it could lead to an investigation by Alsford. The story is hard to believe, which is probably why the young man remained silent. But I would like at least Altair to be able to trust and support. Until this moment, no one loved the lady, she was already used to it, but she wants Altair to completely change the situation. The young man put the ring on his wife's finger. It should return to its rightful owner. She should not worry anymore. This problem is for Altair, he will deal with it. From the moment they got married, the hero acquired the right to stand up for Nadia, and will continue to do so. It is difficult to trust the beauty, but she is happy that everything is just so. The brunette hugs Wayne, promising that he will help with anything. Thoughts should be occupied only with the upcoming Eastern event. Everything else is not so important. Mary called out to her mistress. She had once again forgotten herself in thoughts about the man, so she did not understand where she had come and how it all began. The girl just needed to think a little. The maid decided to tell her the good news, because all the preparations were completed. Since Alsford trusted Vane to be a viceroy, he would be proud of, she decided to make a plan of action that would be realistically achievable. A small tea party was arranged with the knights. The lady conducted a survey about taste. One said that everything was wonderful, but Cain asked not to trust him. The beauty smiled easily, laughing. Reliable people with small mugs in their hands made her feel confident. However, the lady understood that things would not work out that way. There was a plan to arrange a tea party with the knights in order to practice speaking with the nobles before the meeting at the Eastern Assembly. In the end, everyone treats the heroine with care. She doesn't understand what to do next. The guys decide to respond by inviting the lady to a festival that will soon take place in the village. There is so much magic in the city, so at the festival, people ask for protection from magic and the reign of heaven. Cain said that the master had never been there, but he was obliged to go. The woman was distracted and didn't even notice how Altair came to them. He looked unbearably tense and finally handed over the bouquet he was holding behind his back. The knights who were still nearby began to comment, as they themselves were even more surprised, and in order not to anger the lord, they decided to leave and do their own thing. Milady wanted to stop the boys, but they ran away. The brunette again attracted her attention, asking why she didn't like such a guest. It turned out to be something else. The beauty thanked him for the gift of flowers, but before she could finish her sentence, the man kissed her on the forehead, and her face immediately turned an even brighter red. The woman didn't know how to react. It seemed as if her heart was ready to jump out at any second due to her broad feelings. Recently, Pavel told something he understood, that it was better, of course, not to interfere, but he also could not stay on the sidelines recently. He talked with a lady and heard something strange. The beauty said that Mary was the only servant that did not torment her. This all worries her. Perhaps the girl's position in the Marcus's house was much worse than expected. My lord ordered to stop. Obviously, he knew everything. Blank was engaged in espionage activities in the capital. For a reason, Nadia told the whole truth. The heroine trusts her husband, which generally seems logical. The servant decided to cross the line, although he knows perfectly well that it was something worthless. Servants should not talk about the affairs of the masters, and not question orders. The man turned away. Nadia was the first to break the agreement. She treated the people of Alsford like family. That's why the butler dared to do just that. The heroine is considered, however, to be a wonderful person, something no one has ever seen before, and now she is irreplaceable for those whom she never even knew before. The brunette nodded. He himself understood that his wife was a good person. He understood this better than anyone else, and there was no way he could change it. The girl brought the young man out of his thoughts and asked if he wanted to join the tea party. She could not find any other reason and asked Mary to prepare the drinks. Lately, the lady often organizes tea parties. The heroine smiles, but cannot admit that she is simply training because she is not accustomed to social events. In any case, Altair will be a guest. The man would like to find out what conversations are usually held about at tea parties. Before his arrival, everyone was chatting cheerfully. It turned out they were discussing the festival. Cain said it would be good for everyone to go there together. The young man asked if the lady was bored. He was talking about himself, but he was not very talkative, and his manner of speech was strict. The beauty said that she also doesn't know how to have a normal conversation. There is nothing surprising about this. They are similar when her parents were alive. She always avoided social events. She is pleased to find someone just like her. The couple has the same problems and can support each other, no matter what. Train better together. Tea drinking was originally intended to improve the atmosphere at the Eastern meeting. Altair suggested having tea every day. The lady hadn't planned on it, but since her husband had suggested it, she couldn't refuse. The young man reminded her that there was no need to be perfect. Aristocrats wouldn't appreciate it anyway. Nadia is a very good person. That's enough. Everyone in Alsford has come to love her, and this is just the beginning of something bigger. The girl didn't believe that she would hear something like this, even once more in her life. It all seemed unreal to her. When she lived with her uncle, she felt worthless. In a new place, a woman is made to feel needed in a way that was not the case before. When a lady hears words, she wants to live up to expectations and not let down. After some time, the time came for the Eastern aristocratic meeting. Everyone was waiting for it to the point of exhaustion, and now, finally, it was here. The man had been getting ready since the morning. He realized that he looked great. Only when all the elements were completed, he was ready to go out into the light of the silent battlefield. When that very evening came, Balhal found himself the center of attention of the girls. Each of them wanted to ask something, and he smiled, promising that he would answer everything. While Altair was absorbed in hunting monsters, the young man gained influence in the social circles of the Eastern aristocrats. For some reason, ladies began asking if Baron Alsford would come. The hero declared that everything would happen because he personally sent the invitation. The ladies simply blinked their eyes, surprised at how everything was happening. They were happy because they would see the one who single-handedly defeated the dragon. Usually, no one cares about Altair. The man is so desperate that he wants to tell everyone all his shortcomings again, but they don't even let him open his mouth because everyone starts looking somewhere else. A beautiful, luxurious carriage appeared. The decor was exquisite, and exactly like it came from Lynn's workshop. Such a carriage could only belong to a prince. They said that the third orc prince would arrive, in which case it was true that everything was not just like that. Balhal stood in the front row to see everything in detail. A girl came down the steps. She was dressed in a riding outfit. Her eyes sparkled, and her smile made everyone around her feel weak. It was the first time Alsford had seen anything like it. Perhaps someone had brought a mistress. The only nobleman who could afford such a carriage was Carson. The man remembered who this aristocrat was. He was just an old man who no longer needed anything. If the girl came with him, she could easily be lured away. Baron Altair approached. He gently hugged the lady, and they began to talk about something people in the crowd whispered, realizing that in front of them was the wife of that hero. Balhal thought that his relative's woman was ugly. He would have to change his plan before he wanted to make the lady his mistress. But since she was so desirable, this radically changed the matter. The woman begins to feel uneasy. The situation is progressively getting worse. She is pierced by glances. It becomes cold. Those gathered are looking only at her. When meeting people, the lady believed that the first impression was the most important thing. She wanted to be right. She smiled, and everyone immediately began to whisper about beauty. Altair asked not to be nervous. He would do everything in his power to ensure protection. The hero looked somewhere. A man was standing in the crowd. That man is really unpleasant. It's as if he's hinting that he'll make the situation worse. The brunette didn't take into account that it could be cold in the forest. He urgently needs to ask for a raincoat. His wife is shaking. Blue-eyed assured her that she was fine. Questions rained down on her, but it all didn't matter that much anymore. She feels great when she feels cared for. In the distance, carriages were visible. The guests had finally arrived. The carriages bore the Imperial family's coat of arms. The girl also turned around, and her eyes widened as realization dawned. Among those who will be present is also Orca. He was always invisible, sick, standing one step away from power. The man actually had a plan. Under the pretext of illness, he secretly traveled through the provinces, gaining strength, in order to raise a rebellion, reaching the pinnacle of power as a brilliant strategist. Now the man has arrived and is standing a few meters away. The lady feels as if something is wrong. This is not at all what she imagined. He does not look sick. The guy smiled at the girl, and she became even more embarrassed because it seemed unreal. The husband calmly noted that the beauty's face suddenly turned pale. Alsford wanted to say something else, but Orca approached them and said that he really wanted to meet. Even though he was ill, he loved strong, self-sufficient people. The prince is the first to greet, extending his hand. He is not imperious, but relaxed. The strength of a man that captivates provincial nobles lies precisely in his ability to play out the situation. The brunette shook his hand and introduced himself in return. It was hard not to notice that the baron's estate had undergone changes. It really was a wonderful place. The young man treats the couple as if they were true nobles, asking for an invitation. Altair also understood the hint that if things were left as they were, the confrontation would be endless, and the girl decides to intervene. Blue-Eyed invites him to visit their estate if the young man really wants it. After all, they have no right to refuse. His Highness thanks the Baroness for such warm feelings. It was time to say goodbye. It was the first time that the lady spoke so openly with members of the king's family. The husband asked if the woman would like something to drink so as not to be so tired. The beauty wanted to agree, but they were interrupted. Balhal approached, surprised that his nephew was finally showing his bride. There was no point in hiding her from his relatives. The brunette apologizes for not being able to come to the wedding. He extends his hand, stating that Altair got married without telling anyone close to him, so they will have to greet him later. The girl was simply surprised, but her hand was already gripped with a death grip. The young man did not expect that his nephew would marry such a wonderful girl. Balhal held on to the wrist for so long that Alsford couldn't stand it any longer, throwing his hand away with all his anger and hidden enthusiasm. Everyone around noticed laughing slightly at the man. The brunette suggested leaving. They should not tolerate the attitude of a scoundrel who cannot control himself. The relative continued to watch Nadia's back, even when she moved away. Noticing the beauty's worries, the guy suggested not to worry anymore. It's easier for a girl to enjoy the meeting and not occupy her thoughts with anything unnecessary. It seems she will have to communicate with a whole crowd of people. All she can do is smile. The Baroness walked forward and timidly greeted him. Within a second, she was surrounded by various ladies, each asking her to tell different things, especially stories about the capital. The Baron gave Milady a small hug, wishing her luck with everything she wanted to do. Nadia realized that the time had come to show the results of the training she had been doing at the estate. When the girl sat down at the table, she realized that she had not disappointed her husband after all. Everyone was well disposed towards Alsford, better than she had expected. The heroine assumed that it was probably all because of the mine, with magic stones, and the dragon hunt. The Eastern meeting went without problems, while Nadia answered various questions. It all ended not entirely well. The girl herself did not understand how she found herself face to face with a huge bear, which only foreshadowed death. While she was talking to the aristocrats, they continued to talk about how Alsford was lucky, while Madame had only had bad luck, but it seemed that everything had changed. The girl was absorbed in conversations about the estate, and then a conversation began about hunting among the Eastern noblewomen. One of the bravest suggested going hunting. She had caught a deer last year. The hostess of the meeting, Gillen, caught both a bear and a lion last year, each with their own special achievements. The girl was asked if she had caught anything in the capital, and she was frightened, assuming that perhaps the Eastern nobles were joking. Blue-Eyed decided to join the discussion, not understanding how it would end. For her smiling, she reported without a drop of doubt that she had easily caught the lion. Nadia thought the jokes would continue until the end, but when a bear appeared on the hunting field and everyone else was successfully hunting, the girl realized that she was really in trouble because she didn't know how to do anything. The woman was left alone with the animal. It gradually approached, making the blue-eyed woman even more frightened, her heart sinking. The beauty understood that she could not die in the forest, and in despair, grabbing the arrow, she struck the body, hoping that she had hit some important point, and all the horror would end. The monster fell to the ground, bouncing back. The girl thought that everything worked out. Some rustling was heard. The lady froze because she thought that there was another bear nearby. Someone unexpected came out of the bushes. The Orca prince appeared and asked if everything was okay. He threw a dagger at the animal, which is why it fell. The blonde couldn't help but notice that the girl wasn't scared. He had coated the dagger with poison, so the bear wouldn't get up again, so there would be no need to worry. Nadia is brave, since she didn't give up so easily, and tried to win the battle. If she's from the capital, then she's probably not used to this kind of hunting, but she decided to catch the bear alone. The girl admitted that she didn't know that hunting was like that. The prince turned out to be kind, but knowing that he is the villain in the novel, the heroine doubts him a little. The hero smiled even more. It was strange to him that Wayne was afraid of him, although he hadn't done anything yet. It was a joke, and because of the tension, the young man decided to change something. The guy offered to go back. He promised that he would take me to the meeting place so that everything would go well and nothing else would happen on the way. The first thing, the aristocrat was met by the others. They were going to send knights to search for the lady so that they could help her. The girl insisted that there was no need. The prince was passing by and helped her. Everything was fine, but she needed to change because all her clothes were dirty. A tent was pitched nearby so that its services could be used, and the maid decided to lead the lady to the tent and the organizer ahead so that she would not be absent for long. Smiling a strange smile, the maid offers to accompany the baroness. The blue-eyed girl is led somewhere into the forest. She began to doubt this secluded place. The brunette finally brought the girl to her place. While the assistant brought her clothes, she could rest a little. The beauty realized that there was no need to worry she had done this in vain. The heroine entered and froze. Balhal smiled. Noticing that he had been waiting for the lady for a long time, the woman backed away and began to ask why they met in such a place. As expected, there was a sensible lady in front of him. She was not suitable for the reckless Altair. The maiden explained that everything was wrong because her husband was a good man. The young man came closer and closer and insisted that the woman didn't know the guy. Well, it was sad that she didn't know his true nature. Otherwise, she would have run away long ago. Nadia started screaming for them not to touch her and pushed away the stranger's hand. The young man frowned. No one dares to behave like that. It seems like someone hasn't been taught politeness. Blue-Eyed stated that the only reckless one was Balhal. If he were a real relative, he would never have done such a thing. The brunette was just going to admire the beauty for her looks, but it looks like he'll need a little training. He's not going to back down. The hero seems to be going crazy, screaming that everything that belongs to Altair is also his. The man will die, because an attack by a beast during a hunt is a common occurrence. The maid who brought the lady into the tent was bribed. Perhaps the hero managed to fall into the trap set by the young man and is now freezing somewhere lying on the side of the road. It is better to resign himself and belong to Balhal. When the man becomes a lord, Nadia's place will remain the same. She couldn't bear to listen to the horrors, so she tried to push him away again by running away. The young man was about to hit the girl, but then a voice was heard. Cain crawled out from under the bed. They were not alone in the tent, so there was no need to make so much noise. In a second, the knight knocked the count to the floor. There was no point in engaging in such nonsense, hoping for some favorable outcome from all of this. Cain said that he was comfortable under the bed, so he decided to rest. He still wanted to talk about recent events and what Lady Alsford heard. They start beating the brunette, and he begs for mercy, because in fact he was in the wrong. The situation becomes serious, gradually gaining momentum. The girl asks the knight to stop. He has not yet taken proper revenge, and the lady has not received an apology, so the young man asks what is wrong. Of course the lady is grateful, but she does not want such a solution. Apologies caused by someone else's force do not matter. They are not sincere. She tells how it really is for her. Cain nodded. He couldn't argue. It was an honor for him to serve the lady, and of course this was much more important. The mistress could still use her squad because she was everything to them. The young man declared that it was time he was not addressing Nadia. Knights entered the tent. Balhal thought that they would help him, but for some reason they grabbed him. The gentleman also arrived and asked what had happened. Too many questions arose. It turned out that the relative had attacked Wayne. Now that strangers have been brought in, it's better to resolve the problem later. The knights said they would arrest the man, and there's probably even every reason for it with evidence. The girl did not immediately understand which order the new arrivals belonged to. They had no symbols or coats of arms, only dark uniforms. It seemed they were an Imperial Special Forces unit. In the name of the Imperial Black Dragon Order, Balhal will be arrested. He will not be able to escape responsibility as he previously wanted. The knights were always so devoted to the Empire that they did not hesitate to draw their sword against a fierce, even aristocratic person. They did so without hesitation. The brunette still pretends not to understand why he is being arrested. He was not allowed to say anything else, because the conversation will only take place in Wallstead. A man is sent to a notorious prison, where people are said to go mad or become cadets before they can prove their innocence. The girl did not believe what was said. She asked her husband if it was true that his relative had threatened the Empire and would now bear the consequences. It turned out that the young man wanted to kill the Aylesford couple. He knew that the prince would arrive, so he had definitely planned everything in advance, knowing what to do. 3 days ago, Pavel reported the threat to his master. Everyone understood that Balhal would not miss the opportunity to do something, but the assistant did not understand why the guy was so calm. There was no need to worry about the Lord, because he was even capable of fighting the dragon, but with Nadia, it was a completely different story. In any case, a meeting on a hunt can also be used as a chance. An important guest will be present, and everything can be changed. It doesn't matter who the Count is going to kill, but what matters is that he will try to kill the prince and will be considered a national traitor. The plan is good, but the motive is obvious. The orc and Balhal have no connection. The man assured that they will not conduct a deep investigation and will simply carry out the execution. According to informant blank, the emperor and the aristocrats have been arguing about taxes lately. The king's power is weakening and the people's strength is growing. If things continue as they are, the aristocrats will achieve tax cuts, which is their main goal. The leader needs a reason to strengthen his power. Pavel is still worried that if an investigation is carried out, it will become clear that Alsford is behind everything. The man remembers Nadia's family, which was always under protection. To oppose the Marquis people with even more power are needed, and thus they will have to be won over at all costs. Alsford has changed the mines and fertile gardens, and the wife's right remain without a shield to keep everything that matters most. It will take great strength. Altair was right and foresaw the threat, so he turned it to his advantage. If all this had been on the pages, the lady would have been shocked by the plot twists. The girl is no longer a reader. She is Nadia. The pain in her shoulders and the fear are not just words on the page. She understands that it was a wonderful act, but the man should have told her too. The young man noticed the tears and wanted to touch them, but the lady jumped back. It was clear that it was impossible to say anything in advance, but although the husband was concerned about safety, it was still unpleasant. Nadia had to hold back since her parents died. Since that day she had to obey too much had happened. The lady wants to rest. Right next to the carriage, the heroine was caught up by Cain, who had something to tell. The young man had heard the conversation and was assigned to protect my lady. The man understands that everything that happened was his fault, but he doesn't want to tell the girl this. She shouldn't have reacted so violently. Nadia would have liked to feel better, but she was also human. She was in the dark and afraid, and this was just a plan of a reliable person. The girl is angry with Alsford, although she knows it is just a mistake from an Eastern meeting that began with anxiety and excitement and ended in the first marital dispute. The brunette didn't understand why his wife was so angry with him. Cain suggested that perhaps everything had become so confused that they had missed something. For the knights and Lord Balhal, he was just a pathetic little mouse, but for the lady, it was something terrible and brought a lot of worries. One has only to imagine how scary it was. The count was still a grown man, and the lady was from the capital. The ideal plan turned out to be not the best. The young man feels that he has made a mistake, and he doesn't know how to apologize to his wife. The organizer apologizes to the prince. He did not think that Balhal would arrange such a circus and ultimately commit a crime. Orca frowned. He didn't think the guy was capable of such a thing. Of course, he was always strange, but not so much that he would behave incorrectly. The blonde decided to resolve the situation. He smiles, noting that there is nothing to apologize for. After all, the organizer is not to blame for what the guests do. The hero thanks him. The young man is really weak and timid, as everyone else said. A cold suddenly appeared around him, which made him embarrassed. He asked where the baroness was. They said that the girl was in shock and could not receive guests, and Altair arrived bringing with him a servant who belonged to the county. Alsford remains calm as the blonde starts screaming, not understanding how anyone dares to touch the maids without permission. The brunette sharply says that the maid was involved in the assassination attempt. The knight and another maid saw the girl receive gold from Balhal. The girl didn't have time to hide the money elsewhere. If you search the things, the gold should still be there. The girl screams that there is nothing there, but nothing came of it. 5 minutes later, one of the knights actually found the money. The count does not understand how it can be proven that the gold was transferred from the tent. Of course, a bribe in itself is not proof, but the bag in which the money was brought is extremely important. Its aroma is different from those that people are accustomed to. Balhal always used his special perfume. The count shouts that he knew nothing. He understands that he could also be accused of treason. The man started to hit her, while the woman screamed that she didn't know it would end like this. Orca smiled. He also knew what he was doing. The Eastern trip had been productive. The meeting was now over, and all the tasks had been completed. Cain knew that Balhal would not leave alive, now having ended up in the infamous prison. If the lands taken unjustly were returned, the long conflict would end. The knight noticed how the gentleman was looking sadly at the ground. He tried to assure her that the lady would be fine. She herself was not very sad. The assistant will be punished for disobeying orders. The hero made it clear that his wife's safety is a priority, but of course, in the end, everything ended up wrong. The brunette can't judge, but he offers to make a gift for the girl. Prepare properly, Lord. The girl won't be able to help but melt. The guy's advice is unreliable, but there is no way out. The Baron has never been afraid that anyone would hate him, but he does not want Nadia to be prejudiced against him. If the plan doesn't work, he'll have to find another way out. The young man understood this too. Cain is responsible for what he's going to do. After a tense meeting in the east, it was time to leave back to Alsford. Mary was by Madame's side, and she apologized sincerely. She was sorry that she couldn't be there at a rather important moment. The blue-eyed one asked not to worry, all the maids were elsewhere. The girl asked Sir Cain, and he said that the Lord really cares about the beauty's well-being, and also about her safety. The lady knows, but this does not improve her mood. Looking out the window, the lady accidentally met her husband's gaze, and she felt a little uneasy because she almost immediately pulled the curtain. It seemed like it would take time to overcome all the fears. Mary nodded, but reminded them that there was no point in delaying it because they needed to remain good spouses. There aren't many couples in the capital who sleep together every day, but the man wants an heir, so they're always together. The girl thought that was the only reason. The blue-eyed woman lowered her head sadly. The woman was right after all. If it were only about the heir, they would have spent the night calculating the right day for conception. The brunette advises to first calm down, then tell the Lord about your feelings. An honest conversation is the best way to resolve the situation. There is no point in thinking about the future right now. It would probably be too much. The gentleman really did offend his wife, so a few days of anger would be fine. The lady had planned to forgive the young man the very next day, but now she has changed her mind. She will remain a slave for exactly 2 days and then talk to her husband. Something happened, the carriage shook. Mary opened her eyes, not understanding what had happened, but she noticed blood around her. Cain ran into the carriage to ask if everything was okay. The maid was fine, but the lady who protected her seemed to be a little hurt. It became clear that help needed to be called as soon as possible to ensure that everything ended well. The Lord was called almost immediately. There should be a village with a healer nearby, or you can go to Countess Gillen because they are next to her lands. The young man could not move. He looked at the woman covered in blood. He had to quickly get ready, tearing off a piece of his jacket, and decided to carefully bandage his head to help at least a little. Altair volunteered to carry the girl. She would have asked where they were going, but he lost consciousness and therefore couldn't. The man decided to go to a village in the territory of the enemy kingdom of Katas. The most important thing is to save Nadia. He will have to take action. There were never any animals in the forest, so someone must have staged an assassination attempt. The Lord is obliged to heal his wife and return to find out everything. A man arrived at the scene. It had long since become dark outside. Lightning was flashing all around, so the woman, the inhabitant of the house, was frightened. The woman smelled blood, realizing that she needed to warn everyone about the attacker, while the young man asked for help. His wife was seriously injured. Of course, Alsford had to cross a foreign border, but he was lucky that a doctor was found, and the bleeding was well stopped. Riti was asked to go to the store for bandages, as the doctor thought there wouldn't be enough of them. The young man quickly realized that this was all just a fake and found more bandages. He took out a knife. If the situation worsened, it would not be very interesting. The man was silent and then noted that the guest spoke Caltassian very well. Now only a doctor could help. They wouldn't dare touch him. It seemed that the hero knew who had come to see him. For some reason, he found out about it, even without having too much information. The man will heal the woman, but if Alsford harms the people of the village, he will not sit idly by. From the mouth of the young man, there are only empty threats. He is not capable of harming anyone. During the war, the hero acquired the gift of understanding who is capable of what. He does not understand how he was recognized because he actually spoke a foreign language perfectly. A quiet voice asks if the hero really doesn't remember anything. It seems he harbors a grudge against Altair that can't be easily removed. Still, the brunette only wants to say one thing. Touching his villagers is out of the question. He won't miss if he suddenly starts seeking revenge. Riti returned just in time, bringing a dozen bandages with her, hoping that would be enough. The boss found out the doctor's name. His name is Leon, and since there is now more information, it will be necessary to order Cain to look at his file. The woman distracted the young man from his thoughts, noticing that her husband also looked terrible. He should wash and change his clothes. His wife should not see him like this, covered in blood. The young man was taken from the room. Although he tried to resist, Leon was left alone. He did not understand how it happened that Riti hit Baron Alsford. The woman finally woke up. She heard footsteps, but did not know who they belonged to. Opening her eyes, the lady did not understand where she was. A peasant woman entered the room and stated that the lady had been unconscious for about a week. and that moving immediately could be a dangerous task. It turned out that the husband was working in a field nearby, and the young man promised that he would definitely help with all the chores. No matter how much the heroine thought she did not see her husband in the field, it was likely that Cain brought the girl to the village, and the locals were mistaken. The woman promised that she would call the girl's husband as soon as possible, and she also pointed to the letter that they had left. The girl didn't want to read and just decided to pretend to be doing something. She froze, because she realized that Altair's handwriting was visible. A few hours before the accident, the young man began to write down what he was really thinking about, and Cain asked if the hero had thought of a gift. The man wanted to help with something, but he was ordered not to interfere, or better yet to stand aside, so as not to get caught in the crossfire. The knight snatched the paper and was very surprised. The draft reminded him of a stone statue. If Altair wanted to make peace, he would not have achieved anything with a rude letter. The brunette was full of enthusiasm, because to melt a lady's heart, you need to write beautifully, colorfully. Cain was going to correct the situation. The hero carefully read everything written and declared that he could not lie in a sincere letter. He had to come up with something of his own that would show his heart and soul. To avoid further interference, the knight quickly said goodbye, and wishing him luck, ran away, leaving the master alone with his problems. Writing beautiful but false phrases is a deception. Altair wrote something down 1,000 times, and then crossed it out again, not understanding what he would do with it. I would have liked to express my regrets, and that Nadia would never again be alone in danger, but formulating my thoughts was even more difficult. The young man decided that even if he succeeded, he would need to rewrite it on better paper upon returning to the city. Conveying his emotions and feelings was the most important thing. The man wanted Nadia to smile again. The girl doesn't know how to react to what's written. There are a lot of crosses out on the sheet of paper, but it's clear how hard he tried and put his heart into it. It would be better to meet with my husband faster. The doctor entered the room. Reedy had already left to call the Baron. The heroine asked if it was true that she had just been spoken to in the language of their country, but instead of answering, the man began to check her temperature. The brunette quietly said that if help was needed, he would help. It seemed to him that the wounds were connected specifically to him. It is unclear why the hero is against the young man, but the lady will not leave it at that. The wounds are from the accident with the carriage, and Alsford always protects her. The beauty quickly regretted that she started screaming. She couldn't stand it and flared up a little. The young man exhaled. He was upset that the lady did not know the true nature of her man. He was just pretending to be kind. The doctor quietly asked the woman if she knew that Alsford had killed his parents and that he had also killed Leon's family.